All right, everyone. Welcome to the FutureProof Virtual Summit, Black in Business. I'm your host, Courtney McKenzie Newell, CEO of Crown Marketing and Communications, and the creator of the FutureProof Virtual Summit series. I am thrilled to have you all here with us today and super excited to be streaming on all these many different platforms. So thank you for joining us, no matter what platform you're joining us from today. We have an amazing lineup of speakers with 4 panels ranging from bringing culture to the boardroom and going into hearing from 6- and 7-figure business owners who started successful businesses and scaled them during the pandemic. And then you'll also hear from panels around social justice and corporate responsibility. Then we'll end off everything with the new rules to networking panel, and we'll close it out with live networking in our Zoom rooms. So we're super excited for you to be here with us today. And I want to give a special thank you to our sponsor, the Coca-Cola Company, for signing on and for participating in this event and all of the events that we have coming up this year as well. So I want to give you a little background on the summit. So last year, we partnered with the Coca-Cola Company to bring together multicultural millennials to really navigate through what a lot of us have said that is the new normal. And the new normal looked very different for a lot of people, but what we wanted to do was be at the forefront of just being innovators in the community and really helping our small business owners, our executives, and our rising stars to really be able to know how to network, how to navigate, how to still do business development, how to market their companies, and how to grow during this difficult time. There's data that has showed that more than 40% of Black-owned businesses have been affected negatively by COVID and have since unfortunately had to shut down. So what our mission is to make sure that we are able to really be a driving force in changing the narrative and really helping our entrepreneurs and our executives continue to grow and scale during this time. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and kick off with our first panel, and we will have a brief introduction. All righty, Herschel, Hamilton, Egwin, and Babka, we are here today and super excited to have you here with us. And we will have one additional panelist join us. But I want to go ahead and get started. Egwin, can you tell us a little bit about your background? You're VP over at Bank of America right now, but can you tell us a little bit about the start story and how you went from wanting to climb the corporate ladder and actually doing that effectively?
Yeah, my career started really as I started off as a CPA. So my background was in finance. And upon when I was coming over to Bank of America, one of the things I wanted to do something was more strategic and more in line with some of the things that I studied when I got my MBA from the University of Maryland. So at the time, one of the hot topics was vendor management because of the new pronouncements for the OCC. And that's how I ended up in a new world of dealing with businesses on the contractual side and the procurement side. And then I found my way into supplier diversity that way, and where I spent for the last several years.
Nice. And we're going to dive more into your story, Egwu. I would love to hear from you, Herschel. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you're now a real estate venture capitalist, which is a fairly new term, but would love for you to highlight some of the key components in your career that have led you to doing the amazing work that you're doing now.
Right. Great. Thank you, Courtney. So I started my career as an investment banker, doing public finance transactions, working with municipal authorities and cities to help them issue bonds to build, big real estate projects, stadiums, convention centers, wastewater treatment plants, and things of that nature. And did that for a decade and actually spent 2 terms doing public sector stints in former public officials administrations. I worked for a former governor in Alabama, worked for a former mayor in Birmingham. And all that kind of background set the stage for what I ultimately started in 2003. My partner and I started our firm in 2003 as a real estate development firm. We were pure play developer and, did really well going into 2008, 2009, what people call the Great Recession. When the market turned down at that time, we made some strategic decisions and determined that we really needed to expand the breadth of our company. And so we started 3 separate divisions at that time because we were thinking forward to the next recession and making sure that we essentially recession-proof the company. And so what we did was we started 3 or 4 other divisions that provided us with diversity of product type. And actually, it has worked very well during this downturn in the marketplace, this COVID-induced downturn, because, we've been clicking on all cylinders during this period of time. And so as a firm, what we've done is we identify opportunities in the marketplace, in the commercial real estate marketplace, not only for ourselves, but for clients. And from a real estate ventures perspective or real estate venture capitalist perspective, it's not only real estate projects, but it's initiatives as well that bring value to the marketplace. And one of the ones that you and I have talked about is our, community development core program, which maybe I'll get a chance to chat about as well.
Nice. Hey, Jeff. So, Jeff, if you can just give us a little bit of your background from Howard University to then going to the NFL, winning a Super Bowl, and now being SVP over at Aon.
Sure. I'm happy to join you all. I know I'm a few minutes late, so I apologize. So former NFL player, originally from Detroit, Michigan, actually transferred to Howard University, which was probably one of the best decisions I could ever make. Was blessed to go on and play in the NFL for 4 years. My rookie year, I won a Super Bowl with the New York Giants, which is 2007. Super Bowl 42, went on to play 2 years in Cincinnati, my last year in Philadelphia before I got hurt. At 26 years old, I was essentially retired. I had to figure out what I was going to do next. I quickly went back to school to finish up my last semester of undergrad, took some time off, and met with some mentors and some other important folks in my life and decided to go into a career in insurance. I started off at a really small firm in Philadelphia. Decided to go back and get my MBA, which I did at Columbia University in New York. And upon graduating, I took a senior position at Aon, which is probably the largest insurance brokerage in the global market. That's pretty much my time. I travel quite a bit. The pandemic has obviously shut that down, but happy to be at Aon and join the conversation today.
Nice. Awesome. So with that being said, I'd like to throw the question to you, Herschel. When it comes to diversity in the boardroom, why do you believe that that's important? We're seeing companies across the globe have initiatives now, but what are your takes on why it's important now more than ever before?
Well, from a diverse perspective, people bring different and valuable perspectives to the table. It's really important for organizations and corporations to recognize the value that's being brought to the table. For example, my background has been entrepreneurship. I've been a serial entrepreneur for years. And typically that's a background that if you look at the profile of people who sit on corporate boards, you don't see a lot of entrepreneurs on corporate boards. You see CEOs and various other people of organizations. Boards are beginning to become aware that not only is it important to diversify professional experiences for people on boards, but it's also important to diversify the cultural makeup of those boards because, you can bring unique perspectives to the table that other board members, may not possess.
Ooh, I like that. Edward, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the importance of diversity when it comes to not just the workforce, but also the boardroom.
Yeah. I wasn't around for it. From what I understand, in the 80s, the term diversity became, much more popular than it had been before. You were seeing a more homogenous representation at the top of organizations. One of the things that you find now is that they're actually putting it into practice, where not only are the boards starting to look like society in general, but they're really looking for the voice of the customer to be at that decision-making table, somebody who understands the product line, someone who you actually would be selling to at another time in another place, because now you're beginning to understand what the different markets look like, what the different segments look like. How can you service your clients and customers better? I think that's why all the boards are starting to diversify and change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that as millennials and Gen Z really become more diverse, I think that it's essential for brands to really be able to thrive and be around, for the foreseeable future. Just because you're big now doesn't mean you'll always be big. So,
Sure.
So Jeff, I actually want to throw that question to you. Do you think that diversity, especially in the boardroom and bringing culture to the boardroom, do you think that this is a trend, or do you see it as a new way of life and something that companies should be on the forefront of?
That's a great question. I definitely think it's a trend, really following the incidents last summer with George Floyd. I think the ultimate goal is for companies not to have diversity initiatives, that we're truly hiring the best talent, and we understand that different perspectives in the boardroom or in the management team are extremely important. It benefits not only your consumers, but it benefits the company's bottom line, right? So I definitely think it's a trend. Unfortunately, our society moves with the ebbs and flows, right? But we'll see what happens. I'm really interested to see kind of what these diversity initiatives look like 5 years from now. I think it's a big question.
Yeah, Courtney, corporations have been reactive at this moment. And so what we're looking for is signs that they are shifting to becoming proactive as it relates to diversity. What we always do is we hear what corporations are saying, but we look to see what they're actually doing. And so we look for signs that the influences of that diversity are taking shape down in the body of the corporation. For example, we work with a couple of corporations where they are incorporating diversity and inclusion into the supply chain apparatus of the business, so that those decisions go down to those managers who are making buying and selling decisions. And so we look to see what corporations are actually doing. So the jury's still out as it relates to, whether it's a trend or whether people have really embraced this wholly. But, the telltale signs are in the actions that the corporations are taking.
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting thought. And I agree with you, Herschel. I think that when it comes to the supply chain, and a lot of organizations do have supplier diversity programs. And what we're seeing now is there are also workforce diversity programs as well. And they're starting to roll out. And there are a lot of companies that have created initiatives, long-term initiatives as well. So we're hopeful. And I can say what I'm seeing, I actually think that it could be, I think that while it started as a trend, I do think that a trend can eventually become a new way of life. So we're optimistic in that thinking. And I think that it's essential for brands to be future focused, really identifying that you have to think about this and really make it a key consideration as you're building out your departments and as you're really hoping to attract the next wave of customers. So what are the pros and cons, if any, of bringing diversity into the boardroom? I know we talked about some of the pros, but there may be people who think that there are cons associated with that. What would you all say to that question? I'll start with you, Egwu. Oh, you're actually muted. Hold on.
That's probably the biggest saying of this pandemic is you're muted, right? The first pro is always going to be better decision making, right? So you make better decisions the more people you have in the room that are thinking differently. It's been scientifically proven. It's the first thing you learn week one in business school is how diversity of thought can change the decision making. I think the secondary thing is kind of related to the first, but really moving people outside of their comfort zone really enhances products. For instance, there's a lot of times where if a product is only suiting or a service is suiting one person or one group of people, they don't see anything wrong with it, right? But when someone else says, well, it's not, that doesn't work for me, I would like X to be added, it moves you out of your comfort zone and into another area that you actually get to increase both sides. And another thing for another pro, I think it just gives you a new segment to operate in. It just gives you new new people, new thoughts, obviously, but it gives you a whole opportunity to kind of deal in different things of age, diversity in the neighborhood and stuff like that. Cons, I would say that when you diversify, things take a little longer, right? Because when you're not, everything that's not homogenous takes a lot longer, right? Because you're gonna have individual thought. You're gonna have a little bit more time that you're gonna need to listen to different people a different way. And that would bring the next point I would have, which would be you kind of get the stiff arm a lot of times when it's change. So really, thoughtful change management is something that you do. And then another thing, you have to be open, the other con, you have to really be open to shuffle things around if, there's that resistance or you're seeing that things aren't working. So, those are kind of the three pros and cons that I thought about.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I'd love to hear your take, Jeff.
Yeah, so I agree with the pros, with the main one, which is that we know by now that the data has proven in the research that the more diversity, the more different perspectives in the room, the better products we create, the better systems we build. And again, it ultimately benefits the bottom line of that organization. So that's an obvious pro that unfortunately is still being pushed back on. I think the con is, being able to kind of navigate those hallways and those boardrooms. I do think you need allies at a certain point, right? And so if you're a young employee and you're trying to push strong or bold initiatives, I think it's a lot easier to go about that route if you have allies. I think the other con is that, to follow up his comments, is that, it does take time, right? A lot of these are obvious changes that should be implemented and made. However, it takes time to implement some of these changes. So,
yeah, I'd love to hear your takes, Herschel.
So, Courtney, from our perspective, I think that bringing culture and diversity into boardrooms is universally positive. And I say that, but just from reflecting on the first board that I served on. So the first board that I served on was, I was in my late 20s, and it was a convention center authority board. And it was there that I learned the importance and influence of boards of directors, because at the board level, you establish policies that influence how the organization acts on all matters, especially as it relates to diversity. For example, in hiring, as it relates to vendor supplier selection and professional service consultant selection, all those things really influence who gets what related to those organizations. And it influences the participation of African-American businesses as it relates to those corporations. And so from a young age, I realized that, it's positive to bring that perspective to the table, because, even then I just reflect on being at the table, being able to ask questions, of those managers, division managers, when they came to the table and talked about the audiences that they were catering to, asking the questions about, have you thought about this market, this audience? And so you bring that perspective to the table, and you're able to, in a professional way, challenge some of the assumptions that they have in order to help them reorient themselves to the fact that, there are diverse applicants, diverse markets, and diverse, a whole diverse universe that needs to be. And so I just think universally diversity is a good thing, and that there, no cons associated with it. Change is hard, period. And so even change in the boardroom is difficult, but, times are changing. And so people need to embrace change.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, so right now I serve on 3 boards, and I'm thinking about the makeup. I'm definitely the youngest person. I'm the only millennial on the boards. And I want to say, yeah, I'm actually on one of the boards, I'm the only Black woman. And on the other board, I'm the youngest Black woman. I think there may be one additional Black woman. But one of the things that we're constantly talking about is the diverse perspective, and things that my fellow board members would have no idea about, some of the thoughts and some of the needs of different people who may look like me or business owners that I represent and who I'm representing, because on some of the boards I'm representing the Black Chamber of Commerce. And it's just interesting because sometimes you really don't know what you don't know, and having a safe space is important, to be able to have that dialogue and be able to openly share your perspective and also listen to the other perspective, and then hopefully be able to work together to affect change. So yeah, I think that's great. So when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion departments, is it important? Because we're talking a lot about the large corporations, but there are a lot of small businesses out there, and small businesses are really the ones that are driving not only jobs in America, but also driving innovation. So when it comes to smaller businesses, do you all think that smaller businesses also need to be invested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, or is it more of a top-down approach where the larger corporations should be the leaders in it, and then the smaller businesses almost kind of comply and follow the lead of the larger corporations? I'll start with Egwu.
Yeah, so I guess I would say depends on that one, because some businesses are very small and don't have the opportunity to be more diverse. But I think if 2020 taught us anything, at least diversity of age and thought is huge, right? Because last year at this time, where we were slowly rolling into what we would be in right now, I don't think everyone was ready for the technology impact of what they were going to deal with. The Zoom conversations, being comfortable in the digital realm, understanding how to download things and put things up on the web, how to have these meetings that digitally, because you can't do it in person. I think that was a big shift for some generations, right? To go from, everyone coming in, shaking my hand, to not seeing anybody for a year or so now. So I think if you have a age diverse workforce, it might help you there. And then even when you're dealing with some demographics, some of the issues of the day, when, the other pandemic we went through as Black people, I think you're diverse, having the diversity, having someone in that organization who can speak to you and kind of help you understand that would have been helpful also. So I think diversity actually makes you more agile for some of the things that you can't expect to happen.
Yeah, I love that thought. I think that it's definitely important. And we saw a lot of our clients really saying, hey, we need to be able to pivot. We don't know anything about social media. We need our customers to know that we're open. So can you help us? Or, how do we let our customers who we don't think are on social media, how can we connect with them? Are they on social media? So, that was a big thing as well. And then within corporations, everyone had to essentially go remote, whether it was, and a lot of people are still remote. My team and I, we're all remote right now. But a lot of people, like you said, they did have to actually go remote essentially overnight. And it did take a lot of navigating. And honestly, some people are still trying to navigate that. And so we'll see what happens as the time goes on. But I would love to hear your perspective, Jeff, on just, is it important for the smaller businesses to also have DE&I initiatives, or should it be more of a top-down approach where the larger corporations are leading the charge?
I think it's important, especially as you're building out that team. You have products in the market. At the end of the day, if you're a small company, you still are competing against the bigger companies, right? You're competing against the Walmarts and the Amazons. And so we see almost like clockwork, these larger companies release some type of marketing that is just extremely offensive, and then they have to walk it back. They have to close stores. It impacts revenue. That's an opportunity for small companies to gain leverage by putting out products that think about every consumer, number one. But again, even if you don't want to, quote unquote, do the right thing or, adhere to changes, like Herschel said, this, we know from a data perspective, has a positive impact on your bottom line. In fact, you will do better than your competitors if you have diversity in different perspectives in the boardroom and specifically at the management level. So I definitely think it's something small companies need to do.
Yeah. Okay, Herschel, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. So the demographics in the country are changing, and that demographic change is going to impact not only large corporations, but small businesses as well. the predictions are about 2040, a majority of the people in the United States will be people of color. And so that's a significant trend, especially from a consumer-based perspective. And so businesses, small businesses win in a niche. They're niche players.
Mm-hmm.
And so as niche players, what niches are evolving in the marketplace. And today it's all about diversity and evolution of diverse people and diverse perspectives. And so I think it's important for small businesses to look at that and look at those target markets, because those are the places that they'll win, because you can't go toe to toe with, the 800-pound gorilla. You got to find your niche that you can really excel in.
Yeah, Jeff, I love what you said about, as a small business owner, you're competing against the Walmarts and, the larger organizations. And I love that perspective too of, you really do have to, everyone should be considering and really implementing diversity and inclusion and equity into their business model. But it still seems like the case still needs to be made for a lot of people. And that's what we're seeing. And that's what we sometimes are up against. But I do agree. I think that small businesses really win in the niches. And I love that perspective. So, Egwu, I want to start with you with this next question. We know that representation matters. We've been talking about it now for quite a while. But when it comes to actually affecting change, what can companies do to actually become more inclusive and bring diversity into the boardroom and into the workforce? Because a lot of people say, okay, we know it's important, but what are some steps or what are some key considerations that organizations, both large and small, can do to make that a way of life and a part of their business?
That's a good question. I think, first of all, it's always going to go back to actual intentional steps at all points, where, the prerogative of senior management has to understand and realize the strength that they have in diversity, right? The value proposition. And actually, when it comes down to it, businesses are in business to make money. So they have to realize that the value in there is actual increased profits and decreased expenses, right? And that's the language that people will understand. So once it gets there, I think one of the things that you saw in the pandemic, which was a good thing, I think, especially with the pandemic that we went through with racially, was that a lot of companies came out with chief diversity officers that didn't have them before, right? Yeah. So I think that was the first step to them understanding that at least there's a problem, right? So big kudos to any company that saw that in what they were doing and decided, all right, we at least need to start here with putting something in. A second thing is really making a top-down approach where it becomes an initiative that everyone is in understanding, that everyone from the top to the bottom of the organization understands that this is something that we are going to change. This is something that we're going to update, and they understand why. They don't think it's diverse people, whether it's age or race or anything, or ability, mental ability, that are coming in to take my job that I rightfully have, but the get the understanding through the company of what value this is going to bring and how this is going to make us better.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. And I agree with the top-down approach. I think that it has to come. I think the initiatives are they're only as strong as the leadership that's pushing them. So if you have the CEO and the CEO is committed to the change, then I think that that's really, it gives the people who actually really are driving that or trying to drive that change permission and the allyship to be able to do so confidently. But I also think that it helps for everyone else to see across the board that, hey, this is a new standard, and so this is what we're working towards as a company and as a whole. And like you said, Egwu, it's really good for the overall organization and for the future workforce as well. So I'd agree. Jeff, would love your take on what companies can do in order to really increase diversity in the boardroom and in the workforce.
Yeah, great question. And really just piggybacking what many of you have said is just being proactive, right? I think it was pretty easy to respond, in regard to last year, the George Floyd incident and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, right? believe it or not, companies, large corporations saying Black Lives Matter was kind of like trendy. That was cool, right? If you hadn't released a statement, you were behind the eighth ball. But we all know that statements, Black Lives Matter, on the avenue downtown, that's symbolism, and symbolism doesn't drive change. What drives change are real tangible plans that you can measure and assess 5-10 years down the road, right? So we came out in 2020, we said diversity matters, Black Lives matters. But if 5 years from now, that organization is only, let's say, 1% more diverse, or the board looks the same, as well as mid-tier management, then what are we doing, right? And so tangible plans that we can assess in real time, and gradually, again, whether it's 3, 5, 10 years out, I think is most important, in regard to kind of how we make some significant changes, because a lot of this is reactionary. It's good to see the reactionary. People have pulses, but we want to see people be proactive, and put some of these things in place. And again, at the very least, if you want to say this benefits our bottom line, you know what? It does. That's at the very least why you should be doing it. And in that case, because businesses have to make sense, there's a ton of pressure quarterly for public companies to produce financial results. Then that should be at the very least why they're doing it.
Herschel, would love your take on that.
Yeah. So Jeff and Egg were right on point. It's all about intentionality and all about being proactive. But at the end of the day, what you got to do is measure what these corporations do. For example, are they putting metrics in place that define what goals they have related to diversity, not only at the board level, but at the corporate spend level? For example, when they hire these diversity and inclusion officers, are they giving them budgets, for example, where they control a budget that actually has measurable goals attached to it, where they have to achieve certain milestones, and then being outcome based. Courtney, you and I have had many conversations where, I got this thing about opportunity. The word opportunity to me means nothing. Corporations have to be intentional and outcome based, just like they're focused on profits as an outcome. They have to be focused on diversity as an outcome as well. And then one other thing is, I always try to watch companies' the pipeline of young executives, moving up to the C-suite, because again, it's another telltale sign of, I hear what you say, but I'm watching what you're doing. And so have you put in place a pipeline of young executives that come up through your organization so that they can occupy those C-suite positions? So companies just have to be proactive. They got to be intentional, but they have to be challenged. And again, that's why it's important to have representation at the board level, so that from a policy standpoint, they can help those executives frame the things that they need to do in order to truly be effective in the realm of diversity.
Yeah, I love that. So to piggyback off of that, Herschel, do you think that companies, one, should be promoting their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals as they continue to really refine them and establish them, if it's something new for them, or is it something that they should be working on in the background? Just would love your perspective on that.
Well, I think it needs to, be a goal that's set for the CEO of the organization, just like they have a certain profit objective that they have to hit. Just they have expense reduction bogeys that they have to hit. They need to have, they need to set diversity targets as well. And I don't mean that from a quota perspective. I mean, from a spend perspective. For example, if I'm spending $1 billion with vendors and suppliers, we have an objective to increase our spend with diverse vendors and suppliers by X on an annual basis, and publish that, and then show how you're benchmarking against that, in your annual reports, so that it becomes known that the corporation has this as a priority. And when people publicly make those statements, then you can hold their feet to the fire. If you do it in the background, maybe not. But when you publish it, and then you have to move and try to hit those milestones, it's a different proposition.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Egwood, would love your thoughts on, when we're talking about diversity, and we talked about it in the boardroom and in the workforce, a lot of companies have come out and said, this is something that we're working towards, but we don't know how to find or attract top diverse talent. What are some ways that companies can start to get that ball rolling if they haven't already? Or what are some of the ways that they can focus on retaining their diverse talent?
Okay, the old adage that they can't find black people or people of color. We hear that a lot. Well, I think the first step to finding people of color is to hire people of color. And I think I've always heard people that used in my career that there was no one else. There was no one else. But as you grow in your professional career, you probably know 15 people who could fit that bill and stuff like that. So they have to make the intentional high level hire. They have to really understand where the backlog is really affecting most companies, and it's typically not the top. I think the top of most companies, there's a level of commitment there, but the middle is somewhere in there is either harming or killing what's below, not allowing it to move up, or not allowing that the right hires in that area to really bring people in. Now, I'm not saying that it's the responsibility of every person of color to hire their own person that looks like them. I don't think that's the responsibility. I think it should be more so an initiative to actually make these hires, and people's diversity actually should mean something to the hire, right? It should be like, let me bring somebody in of this background because I don't understand. And this is something that will help us, right? So that's why I keep bringing it back to a business decision, because when you look back at a group and you see it's very homogenous, it's not going to be as helpful as it can be. So I would say the first step to finding more people of color is hiring a person of color. That's a good start. And then, it'll go from there. Trust me.
Yeah. And that makes perfect sense. Right. But I agree. I've heard that saying. And also when it comes to suppliers as well, we can't find diverse suppliers, and it's not really, sometimes it's not concerted effort. It's just kind of like we try, but we were the actual steps taken to try. So would love your thoughts on that, Jeff.
Yeah, I think, we often hear, we're focusing on HBCUs, right? As if the only talented or young, bright, millennials or graduates are HBCUs. And that's not to say we shouldn't focus on HBCUs. I went to a HBCU. I think that's important. But the majority of young, Black, talented graduates who deserve opportunities at employment aren't at HBCUs, right? And so I think that's important. And I think it's for those voices internally to push back on that when the opportunity presents itself. I also think when you bring these young folks in, particularly for some of these large organizations with 30, 40, 50, 60,000 employees, is to draw an evident and clear line for opportunities for upward mobility. Too often we see young Black colleagues come in and then they get stuck. Right. And then they see counterparts that came in with them that are being mentored, they're being supported, encouraged, brought up the ranks. Right. And so the opportunity to see upward mobility, I think, is extremely important. And I think Herschel brought that point up earlier, but I can't stress that enough. Making sure that these young, talented employees can say, hey, this is somewhere I might be able to stay for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Absolutely. But what does that look like for me? And when you come in with 6 other graduates and all of them are progressing up the ranks, that draws question not only the confidence of that employee, but it again calls into question of what are you really trying to do? Because the lip service sounds great, but in reality, you're not giving the same opportunities for upward mobility. So I think that's even more important.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Would love your take, Herschel.
Well, I just think corporations need to recruit. I've heard on numerous occasions that I can't find any, line. And a lot of times executives will say that about a specific market. And I tell them that they need to approach, recruiting diverse people just like they do, CEOs and executive officers. They do nationwide searches. And so you've got to engage broadly And corporations just have to start treating diversity not like it's something special, but just like everything else in the organization. And that's the key to really getting people involved in these organizations. And then the whole issue about bringing people in and getting burned out. I mean, they've got it. People in organizations have to have some pathway. Typically, that pathway is up, and you would like to see people having diverse experiences within large corporations, because it then puts them in positions to be managers and executives, because they have a broad base of experience within those organizations. So, again, it's doing for diversity what you do for everything else. It's something that Courtney, you and I have talked about before.
Yeah.
Courtney, can I add to that real quick?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that point, is upward mobility is important internally, but what's I think also equally important is putting people in client-facing roles, right? Because when they're in client-facing roles, they're sticky. They're building relationships with clients, and at these large organizations, these are large clients, 6-figure, 7, 8-figure clients, right? And so when you have somebody who can cultivate relationships, not only do you encourage that, you support that, but putting diverse candidates in client-facing roles, I think, is even more important, because now that person is extremely valuable to the organization and can't just be replaced like that unless you're going to jeopardize revenue.
Yeah. The other thing that does, it also puts that candidate in a position to have other options and opportunities, because I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen external corporate counsel become the CEOs of corporations. They were external corporate counsel to the corporation, and they ultimately become CEO. And so those relationships, those client-facing relationships, give them opportunities to not only nurture direct relationships, it enhances their value to the corporation, but it gives them direct relationships with other corporations and other individuals who can then, influence their careers outside of that organization.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So we actually have a few minutes for Q&A, and I actually got some questions over here from Twitter. So one of the questions that I would love to hear all three of your takes on is, when it comes to mentorship, what are the best steps and best practices in order to find and keep a mentor?
I think it's really, and every time we're in a big discussion, someone asks the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. So I think one of the things that that's really key to that relationship is understanding what it is, right? So a mentorship might not mean that I'm going to hire you for an opening. It doesn't mean that I am the person that's actually going to bat like a sponsor would be, but I'm the person who's going to give you that consistent, honest, and good feedback that's going to help you grow your career, right? So I think one of the things that you have to do first is really make sure that there's an understanding of what that relationship is, so the outcomes can be, looked at more favorably when they do happen.
Yeah, I love that. Jeff, would love your take on that.
Yeah, I think mentees have to have some skin in the game, if that makes sense, right? You're taking valuable time from somebody obviously that's senior of you, who's willing to meet with you once a month, every quarter, to really kind of tell you what they think about you navigating some of the spaces that they've most likely have already been through and have succeeded, right? And so I think, one of the worst things a mentee can do is seek a mentor. That mentor is giving them advice based on their vulnerability and what they think. And then they come back a month or two later and they haven't tried to apply any of these steps or advice, right? I think that's important. I also think, too, whenever you're looking for mentors, that mentor doesn't necessarily have to be like, I'm in insurance. That mentor doesn't have to be an insurance executive. One of my best mentors is a corporate attorney, right? Somebody who's navigated these hallways before me and can still give me tangible, great advice and counsel on some things that I'm experiencing. So you can't think out the box when it comes to mentors sometimes.
Yeah, would love your take, Herschel.
Well, I think the best way to really find mentors is through direct or indirect relationships. If you don't know a person, if you think an individual in your community, for example, might be a good mentor for you, if you don't know that person personally, do you know someone who knows that person? Because, typically people warm up to folks who are referred to them through their network of people. And so, if people participate in programs, like there are national mentorship programs that people participate in, and that's one way. But if you have identified an executive and you think it's somebody that might have a perspective that would be beneficial to you, you just have to find an indirect relationship that you have to that person so that you can, be brought to the table. It's kind of funny, like within our firm, we always say, thou shalt always arrive by referral. Because that's when people say, okay, I'll take that call, I'll talk to that person because of the person that referred you to them. And so it's just a function of, you got to do a little homework. If there are no formal programs in place, if you've identified a person, you just got to do a little homework because, this whole 6 degree of separation thing is real. Right. I mean, if you really take the time to think about it, somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows that person. And you just have to, work your way to that and through that. And so I think if you want to be mentored, if there aren't formal programs, you just have to be proactive, not aggressive, but proactive so that you can, get in contact with people and see if they would consider doing that.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to add that leads into the art of networking, which is a whole nother probably topic, but Herschel's, I totally agree.
Which we have you all covered, all of you watching, we have you covered. Our panel number 4 is all about the new rules to networking. So we got you covered. But I would say from the mentors that I have, one, I always like to have at least a couple mentees, and I always like to have a few mentors. And I think that for me in my business over the past 10 years, for me, what's really allowed my mentors to find them and to have them stick is to, one, like Jeff said, it's not just like all about me. It's about how can I help you? Or, hey, these are some things. I did an audit of your brand. Here are some things that I can help you do. So I'm always coming at it from, hey, this is how I can bring value to you. I just don't want to take up your time. And that's created a mutually beneficial relationship for all of my mentors. And I think another thing, too, that we don't talk enough about is, and Jeff, you know about this probably more than anybody, but, I think that there's a real strength and value that comes with having a coach. And a lot of times when we're talking about high performers, we think about it only from the perspective of, athletes have coaches, but when we're talking about executives, a lot of executives and entrepreneurs don't have coaches. And I think that my business has grown significantly from having coaches, not just mentors, but actually being able to invest in coaches, both, time and financially has been a game changer. So that'd be my take on that. All right. Well, we've gone a little bit over, but man, this was such a great panel. Thank you all for joining. We have some more questions, but I want to be respectful of your time. But thank you all. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Egbu. Thanks, Herschel, for joining us for this Bringing Culture to the Boardroom panel. I know that the attendees are loving it based on all the many messages I'm getting on my phone. So thank you again for joining us, and thanks for being a part of the FutureProof Virtual Summit.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you.
Before you all go, though, I would like to just ask, if people want to connect with you, where's the best place for them to go to connect with you? I'll start with you, Herschel.
From my perspective, LinkedIn. I have recently started actively monitoring my LinkedIn page, so that's the best way to connect with me.
All right, great. Egbu?
Yeah, LinkedIn is always good to find me. Clubhouse is really good now too. Some of the conversations that I lead out, moderate, or talk to, dealing with a lot of the issues I talked about here, and some a little slanted towards civil rights with my attorneys that I have in that film are in that realm are really going. So between LinkedIn and Clubhouse, you catch me.
Awesome. And Jeff?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with me. And I am on Clubhouse as well, hosting some pretty interesting chats, talking about business, diversity, sports, culture. So, but I would start off with LinkedIn.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all. Thank you again for joining. And we're going to go ahead and head into our next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Wasn't that a great panel? Oh, so good. All right. So we are going to kick off our next panel, and you are going to hear from 7-figure business owners who started their business during the pandemic and scaled their business from during the pandemic. Now, I know that 2020 was one of those years that there was a lot of uncertainty, but I want to remind you that in uncertain times, there's always still opportunity. So we're going to jump into the next panel with our amazing lineup of speakers, and we're going to get started in 3, 2, all righty. Welcome. So we have Ray Cole Jackson Esquire. We have Ray and Val of Tal and Burt. And then we also have Amber of the amazing Timeless Vodka. So thank you all for joining us. And hold on, let me just remove that one. All right, perfect. So we are good to go. So would love to kick off with Ray and Val. Tell us about Tal and Burt, how you started it. You're a husband-wife duo. You came up with a beautiful, amazing business, one that I'm obsessed with, and everyone on my team, as we talked yesterday, we're obsessed with it. So can you tell us about the inspiration behind the brand? And were at any point during this beginning of the business, did you ever have any hesitation? Like, is this going to work? We're in the middle of a pandemic. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our home decor brand kind of combines our passion of recreational mining. So it incorporates raw minerals into the designs. And so that's kind of how we wanted to do it. We wanted to create functional art that people could use every day that shows the beauty of nature kind of in its natural habitat before it gets turned into like cut stones that you see in like engagement rings and fine jewelry and stuff like that. So we did start just before, like in the middle of February. So it was like just at the very beginning of the pandemic. And we kind of were hesitant to launch because we're like, are people going to be very reserved with their money? Because it was kind of at that stage where everyone was hoarding everything and basically sheltering down as it was late in the world. So we were like, is this a good time to start a business? Because we were afraid that people were just really either saving their money for the essentials and just kind of preparing for the worst. But we were like, let's just launch and see, and we don't have to invest a lot. So we kind of just invested about like $500 to kind of create a starting amount, and then it kind of took off because I guess people are home more, so they realize they want more stuff for their home.
Wow, it all started with $500. You know, my business started with $500. That's a lucky number. Okay, that's a lucky number. I believe it. Amber, tell us about Timeless Vodka. Now, it's rolling out nationwide, and you have really been able to stand out in what some would consider is a saturated market or a really competitive market, but people are loving your product. So can you talk to us about the creation of Timeless Vodka and how you were able to really get it out there and stand out in a unique way?
Absolutely. And, Courtney, every time I share this story, it kind of, puts a smile on my face. Timeless Vodka was really developed based around my husband, actually. So he's not a big drinker. So what started off kind of as a joke turned into a hobby for a quest to create a vodka that was smooth, neutral, and that the person who wasn't maybe a big drinker or who just liked a casual cocktail here and there would really enjoy. And then kind of blossomed into a full-blown business. So I always tell people I didn't find the business actually found me. We had our official launch January 30th of 2020. We're really excited, rocking and rolling. We were in one state, one city, one store, one restaurant. So we had this big plan of, going out, and then, much like everyone else who's on the panel, pandemic happened. So we essentially are a brand that has no other knowledge or recollection outside of the pandemic. So we just kind of kept in that, it was a labor of love that was designed for him. a labor of love that then became for our family and friends. And then everywhere that we go, we kind of echo the same message. So from our home to your homes, labors of love. And honestly, that's what really helped us get through the pandemic, and people began to resonate with our story. And then, of course, it tastes amazing. So that was the icing on the cake, or I guess the sugar on the rim.
I love that. And I'm more of a sugar on the rim type of girl myself. Ray Cole, would love to hear about title experts. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ray Cole is what we call in Florida anyway, the queen of real estate. And Ray Cole, you recently launched Title Experts. So can you tell us about your background and what made you decide to go down into the title company and really build out something so big and so amazing? Oh, you're actually muted. Oh no.
There we go.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. For whatever reason, my microphone likes to jump to another setting as soon as I move out of the screen, but I'm back and I've been here the entire time. So with that being said, again, my name is Rachel Jackson. I am out of Palm Beach, Florida. It's so funny. This pet name I have, a real estate goddess, just because literally I started my profession in real estate as a real estate agent. That was my first license. I always tell my realtor colleagues that I got my real estate license first in California after my first year of law school. Went on to get my real estate license, got various other licenses. And so I'm just all things real estate, lending, law, like I said, transactional side, title side. Title Experts actually was born out of the desire to build a national title insurance and settlement brand, and one that could collaborate with brokers, right? My husband's a broker. I have a family that's always been in real estate. And so I wanted to develop a brand, again, that could partner with different brokerages. I had been conducting closings through the law firm, Realty Law Group, for years. And Title Experts was actually a brand that I was cultivating and really launched right at the end of 2019, right before 2020, right before the pandemic. And if you guys know anything about real estate and you know about the last real estate crash, of course, anyone in real estate is like, oh my gosh, is this going to be this real estate company? But actually, it was actually the complete opposite. As you guys know, the market took off. It went absolutely crazy. And we really just had to pivot and adjust to the growth. And so it was like Talon Bird said, it was completely I laugh because what happened in this market, what we expected was completely different. And so the challenges that we faced as a result of the pandemic were completely unexpected. And so that's where we were right at the start of the pandemic. We're still here. We're still growing. We're excited. And glad to be having this conversation about what others can do with their businesses during the pandemic.
Yeah, I love that. So Ray and Val, when it comes to so walk us through. So you decided, hey, we're going to start this. We're passionate about this. What were you doing before that? And what led you to say, hey, people are actually, what was the time that you realized people are actually liking this? Let's double down on it. Because I know there was a decision that had to be made. Are we going to contract or are we going to expand? So can you walk us through and share some of that?
Sure. So, I was actually working a corporate job, and once Talonbert kind of took off, it started with just us kind of gradually getting sales and more sales on top of sales, and I had to kind of make the decision if I was going to leave my corporate job and kind of jump on board with Talonbert. But one of the things that kind of made me realize that this is now a big thing is just the amount of sales and love that we was getting all over social media. The features that we were receiving during the time. And I realized that I need to make a pretty big decision on actually just jumping off board and kind of just taking a plunge, as they say, and jumping on Talonbert full time.
I love it. I love it. Val, so when Ray decided to jump on full board and you all were really, because a lot of times people say, I'm partners with my partner. What was that process like? And can you walk us through some of the decisions that you all had to make to really scale the company as you, whether it be through marketing or whether it be through the products that you were going to roll out, whether it be through brand ambassadors? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so we kind of had to figure out like what each of our aspects and like what we were going to be in charge of, because having us both in charge of everything didn't really work out well, because when we have different opinions, it didn't get anywhere. So he's kind of in charge of like the production, like the beginning phase of casting everything, and then I kind of oversee like the product design and fulfillment aspect. So being able to kind of, while we work together, each having our own designated areas that we work to make more efficient and productive in order to scale. And I guess our first big decision was taking the plunge, I guess, on realizing we needed a space. Because when we first started Talonbert, we never expected it to be just more than me and him. We kind of just thought it would be cool if he could work full time and this could be, a business that we could do and make a decent income in. So going into Talonbert, we never dreamed that it could ever get this big that it is now. So we got our first space in like May, which was great because like literally 2 weeks after that, we were featured by like Cosmopolitan and Etsy and CNN, and then the sales increased. So since we had that new space, we were able to actually start hiring people. So we hired our first 3 employees in June. And then from there, we added a second design studio, and then we actually took the plunge in November to open a brick and mortar home decor store in Pittsburgh. Just because we're never probably going to see this actual increase. So we're like, let's invest in another channel and see how it goes. So that's what we did. We took it and put it into a storefront.
I love it. So key components are take the plunge, calculated plunges. It sounds like you were very, hey,
not all the plunges were 100% calculated. I feel like this is a good idea. Let's just do it and hope for the best. But yeah.
I love it. I love it. You have to, there's never 100%. There's always a little ambiguity. So it's like, you know what? It feels right. I'm gonna go ahead and take the plunge. And it sounds like it worked out. And you're creating jobs in a pandemic. While a lot of people had to cut jobs, you're actually someone or a company that was able to actually create jobs. So kudos to you both for building something so amazing. I love that. Amber, when it comes to Timeless Vodka, so when you started to roll it out, it started with one store, one city. How were you able to really take that in a time where people were not going to restaurants, people were staying at home? How are you able to take it from one store, one city, and now actually scale it during the pandemic?
We're an ultra premium product. So when you have an ultra premium product, especially a spirits product, most people want to try it. So we were thinking, that was one thing that we were faced with. How do we sell a product that no one's ever heard of, no one's been able to try, and we're in the highest tier that you can almost be in? So we got really, really clever, and we started to partner with any liquor store or any Total Wine and spirits and more that had any type of delivery service. So we reached out to Drizzly and found out, okay, how do we need to be on Drizzly? What independent retailers were also delivering, who offered curbside. From there, we actually reached out to individual neighborhoods and HOAs and said, hey, listen, my name is Amber. I'm the owner of Timeless Vodka. We are locally owned. Can we just please post on your website? Can we speak to your residents? Any kind of, because everything was contactless, everything was shut down. And for there, we said we will completely have free delivery, because at that point, I need just bottles in hands. I need people to try it. From there, one neighborhood starts promoting. We start seeing sales. Another neighborhood says, well, hello, this one down the street has it, and we want to promote too, surging virtual cocktail hours, happy hours. And it spread from one city. Then our next city was Dallas. Then we went to Austin, and it just kind of continued on. And then we started to just do step and repeats. We would, reach out to states and distributors and say, hey, listen, this is what we've got. This is who we are. This is our story. This is what we've done. After a while, we started getting some press. And from there, we actually started getting distributors reaching out to us. Which was really, really humbling, but powerful to say, okay, we did it. So I was able to say, let's keep the steam going. Once the world slightly opened up a little bit more and we could do tastings, then of course we utilized that. But our very early adopters, we always make sure that they're showing a lot of love and that we're doing everything that they want us to do, because they're really the reason why we are in business today, in our neighborhoods.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So like door to door, almost essentially like really guerrilla marketing style. I love that. And also press. And I think that press is, one of my favorite things. But I think that press definitely plays a huge role in really getting the word out there about your business. So I love that. I love that. So Ray Cole, when I can tell you, I know that a lot of people I was talking to when the pandemic just started, a lot of people were afraid, like, is the market going to crash? And, were any of those thoughts in your mind as you were really deciding, we're going to double down on title experts. We're going to scale it, as opposed to not, or to listen to maybe what some of the chatter is in the market. Was that ever a factor in your decision process?
Of course. Like I said, I lived through the last downturn, and honestly, I guess in some ways you can say I landed on the better side of that downturn. I did end up working in a law firm that represented some of the institutional lenders during that process. And so honestly, that was kind of my background in high volume service industries. And so again, I knew what it looked like, right, to have that tremendous downturn. And ironically, like, we were literally in the process of, it's funny, Talon Bird said, we were in the process of moving to a larger space because we were hiring right at the pandemic. I think in about April, we moved into this 10,000 square feet that we're in now, because we had also launched another business. And so here's the funny thing about that. That worked out because there was this whole social distancing thing, right? So I literally was able to say, okay, you get in that office, like you all spread out. Like there's no reason for you not to come in while we figure out this online thing. And then we eventually figured that out. And then we had to do, like, our challenges were different because, again, we do closing. So what is closing? We're interacting with people all day, and everyone was unsure. And so we were trying to work around, like, how do we conduct a closing? Like, you still have to physically see people and they sign documents and such. And so we figured that out. We got the mask, we did the social distancing, we sent people documents in advance. And so it kind of really like pushed us. It was a positive push. It was painful, I'll be honest. To transition such a high touch, it's a very high touch service, right? To transition into something that was a really low touch and online, as well as not being sure what the market was going to do. Because as everyone will say, when you start taking on more space, like whenever you grow, there's more costs. So we were hiring as well as taking on more space, equipment, everything that it takes to go to the next level generally is going to be a money drain. And so we were investing money in somewhat of an uncertainty. But we got it done. Glad that we did. And we're in a position now to just take off. It was a scary time, but you just kind of really just double down on the fundamentals. Amber talked about the marketing. Our marketing went different, right? Generally, our marketing is in person. We held classes and such. All that went online, right? And again, it's one of those things that was kind of painful uncertain at first. And now we're like, oh, this is great. I mean, look at you. You're able to do a summit in an instant, right? So we're able to conduct a class or a training or market what we do in an instant. Like now we're behind the scenes photos. They see my closers working on files. They see my closers meeting. They see, and that's a totally different, that's something that they really didn't have before, right? So they're able to experience what it looks like to work with title experts. And so everything that caused us to be concerned actually turned out to be a benefit in the long run.
Wow, I love that. And I think that when you're in a situation where no one's ever seen it, I think that you can really write your own rules and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. And you put your own operating procedures in place and you kind of lead that charge. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a great experience. Like I said, it pushed us to do a lot of things. And I think a lot of people feel this way. It pushed us to do a lot of things that we probably needed to do anyway. And definitely caused us to grow. Like I said, as soon as we started doing different marketing, doing, phone call follow-ups to our clients versus passive, the business increased. So it was a good change.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So Ray and Val, when it comes to marketing your business, does marketing look different now that people are, I know when we did some minor renovations in our home since we're all at home now. And our contractor said, we have a 2-month, we're back 2 months. And I'm like, what? He's like, everybody's getting they're like, everyone's doing these home renovations. So does marketing look different for you all now, knowing that people are at home and people want to, they want to invest in the aesthetic of their home? Are you seeing that looks different now than what you were seeing in the beginning when you had just launched Talonbert?
So we're kind of at an interesting stage right now is we actually don't market because we're at the point where we can't handle any more orders than what we get.
That's a great position to be in now.
Unfortunately, we're very space constrained, but we have a new building that's currently being renovated, which probably won't be done until July. But until then, due to our space and maxing out how many staff we can socially distance, like we're just at the cusp. If we were to do marketing, we just wouldn't be able to handle it. So we kind of hold our breath hoping that, like, I don't think anyone's ever said that no one big features us because we won't be able to handle it. Because we're just at the point where we're literally maxed out with the space that we have, and it would just be too stressful on our staff. But in the beginning, we obviously had to market to get our brand out there. And I guess we focused, I guess we kind of took advantage of that because a lot of like our posts and ads would kind of be gearing towards those. And like when we would do shoots with photographers, it was towards home offices and kind of getting like making your space like, hey, now that you work from home, add this to your space to make it a little bit better. Because it was like right at the time where people were being sent home to work home. And now that's kind of more like a permanent thing for some companies I've just completely said, you're working from home from now on. It's kind of how we focused it when we first started marketing was like more of for the office, even though obviously you can use it for tons of things, but we really pinpointed it to kind of make people, because we saw that some people weren't too thrilled about working from home because it's definitely a change of scene. So we kind of took advantage of that scenario.
I love that. I love that. I love that you said, Val, we don't want any more press. We're tapping out. I love that. That is everything. Okay. I love it. So Amber, go ahead. That's a great problem to have. No, but I think that also speaks to the quality of your product. People love it. They're telling people about it. People are like looking at your site. Even we were looking at it as a team, like, which one do you like? And one of my team members is like, I want the pink and green one, and I want this one. And so it just speaks to the value, the quality of it, and how unique it is as well. So I think that's amazing that you've built something so in demand and that you're continuing to scale.
Yeah.
So Amber, when it comes to your marketing, what were outside of when we're talking about online, because a lot of the things that, you know, in order to really scale, there needs to be an online presence as well. So does it look different now that we are, I don't want to say we're definitely not post-pandemic, but as things start to open up and as people are starting to socialize more, does marketing look different for you now than it did when you started Timeless Vodka?
You know, not really. You know, in all transparency and honesty, there is no textbook of how one should market a liquor brand. You can Google, but Google will take you so far. So a lot of things have just been trial and error. We actually do have a social media strategist who handles all of our social media, and we pride ourselves on doing something that we find as maybe unique for us, for a brand. We actually do organic engagement. So we make it a point for everyone that we come into contact with online, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that we have a one-on-one personal conversation with. Hey, thank you for checking out Timeless Vodka. Have you tried this? What cocktails do you enjoy? And we hope to always be able to do that. So right now, I can't say that it looks any different. But we hope to be able to, continue that. And I also love when, if you look at our social media, you'll see that the majority of the pictures actually aren't ours. They don't belong to us. So we have very few stock images. I would say about 95% of the pictures and images that you see of our brand are actually pictures from someone else that we've reshared. And we pride ourselves on that. So, hey, if you try this out, tag us. We'll always reshare because we love to see that the moments that they make and how they make them timeless. That then in turn becomes timeless to us. So people are sick of seeing me. So I want to see, I want to see what they've got going on, and the world loves to, if you mastered this gorgeous cocktail, sometimes people are making things and I'm like, oh my gosh, did you shoot that with a camera? Like, I don't even see that well in real life. So just some beautiful images that deserve to be shared. So that's kind of our marketing. So as we grow, we might have to alter that, but right now it's working. So we're going to continue it.
I love that. And I do think, one of the things that we always talk to clients about is making sure that you have a user-generated content strategy, because people want to see, like when I go to a restaurant, I want to see the actual person's food. I don't want the restaurant's food. I want to see like, how is it actually going to look, right? So I think that that's a great strategy. And it seems like it's working really well for you. So I definitely think for all of you listening and watching, there's nothing that beats user-generated content, and stock photography is always a great addition as well, as you continue to grow the brand. So Rachel, talk to us a little bit about you. So in person, you went from being essentially all in person for your marketing to going online. Can you talk to us about what the process looked like from the marketing perspective of how were you able to get people to join you online? Was there ever any, as some people call Zoom fatigue, where people, you were like, are they going to show up? Is this still an effective marketing strategy? And has that changed from the beginning to right now?
So the funny thing is the framework behind, marketing via Zooms, getting the word out, follow up, etc. Like literally it is the same as far in any industry. You get what I'm saying? So there are some fundamentals of business, whether it's, Amber's vodka business, if she's doing a Zoom on that, or Talent Bird, or even myself with Title Experts, literally, like you're saying, with Zoom fatigue, and you understanding that people are being inundated with so many different pieces of marketing that literally have to hit them so many different ways. So you have social media, you have email marketing, you have phone call follow-ups, you have text messaging. Honestly, if we put something out, it's going to be everywhere. And you have to follow up because people get busy. I mean, I think about myself, how many Zooms or just trainings have you wanted to be on? And you're like, oh my God, I forgot about it. So like we kind of like help them remember. And then also consistency is key. If you're consistently doing something every Thursday, every Monday, every Tuesday, etc., then you'll get your viewership. then just the content really is, it just has to be applicable to their business and something that they can apply right away. Again, like I said, myself being a realtor first, and being in the business, and like I said, my husband being a broker, that's one of the things that I always do. I always aim to provide actionable information. So it's not just saying, hey, use title experts. It's saying use title experts because it was the processes, the procedures, and the services that are offered through title experts were developed by real estate professionals, right? And it wasn't from someone who has not been on the other side of the closing table. It's not built by someone who has not represented buyers and sellers, right? It's not built by someone who has not had to wait for a title agent to get their documents done. I always say, for example, and this is a joke I use. I said when we first started out, we had a what do you call it? A panel of one, my husband, and he was a top producing broker, and he was just just very particular, and when he would have a challenge with a title company, look, you make sure your company doesn't do that. Make sure we don't do that. Make sure we don't do this. And so it was just, what do they call it? A vision group? What do they call those? Focus group. I say we call them a focus group of one. And I'll be honest with you, even to this day, he's our worst client, but anyway, because he's listening. but again, I say, it's a matter of literally putting yourself, as Talon Burt said. I mean, everybody said you got to put yourself in your shoes to make sure that you deliver what they need. If it's anything outside of that, you need to stop doing it because it's a waste of your time. If it doesn't bring value to your client, you need to stop doing it. I mean, us from like a service industry, if we're sending a document that the client does not use, stop sending it because it's a waste of your time and it's a time drain for them as well to receive it. And so that's been the biggest thing, just listening to what our clients are needing. And the last thing I'll say as it relates to marketing is it's always something that's just so simple. I have this book, it's called Ask. Just ask your clients. Does this help you? Is this something that we should continue doing? If so, should we continue doing it exactly this way? Or is there something that we should change? Is there something we should take away or something we should add? And so you want to always be in a posture of not assuming that you're giving your clients what they want and need, but actually asking. And it'll take you, and that costs you nothing, like just asking. And you'll hit it right on target.
I agree. I think that one of the things that we were seeing a lot, really like in between the beginning of March and like April of 2020, a lot of the conversations that we were hosting and having with small business owners, they were like, I don't know if my customers would like this. I don't know. And I'm like you just said, Nicole, let's get on the phone and ask, right? Like we actually put together like, hey, I'm going to challenge you because people love challenges. I'm going to challenge you to call 10 of your customers and ask them how they think about this. Because sometimes you can have a not so fleshed out idea and it could just be an idea. And then you jump on the phone with some people and then they help you flesh it out. And by the end of the conversations, you're able to have like a solid game plan. So I love that. Ask. That's actually a really great book, by the way. I read that. All right. So we actually have some Q&A that I want to make sure that we get to. So this question, I actually would love for all of you to answer this question. Do you think it's important to build a personal brand around your business brand? Why or why not?
For us, I guess it kind of depends on your industry, but for us, I think that we try to be very authentic and let our followers know us and stuff like that. And a lot of people really connect with us and it kind of builds like they know who they're buying from. So we found it very beneficial to be, we don't let them too much into our lives, but we kind of still let them know, like our story and the work behind the scenes, and just so they can still see our face and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love it. And I think too, that just like you said, it lets them know who they're buying from. It creates like this connection. So I love that. Amber, would love your take on that.
So, it's really fascinating. I've actually heard that question a couple of times, and with Timeless, our business brand is our personal brand. Even from, the design to the name Timeless came from a card that my husband gave me when I came back from traveling. And it talked about the moments that you spend with the people that you care most about, make those memories last. And should they ever fade, may the feeling still remain the same, make it timeless. So everything that we do, is personal for our brand. And I think by us putting ourselves out there, being very vulnerable, asking questions, saying, hey, I don't know the answer. You're the expert. I am not going to be the smartest person in the room. But I choose to surround myself with people who are far smarter than I am on the whatever said topic. I think that it allows us to also still speak through our brand. So at times you could be both, or maybe, just like you all said, it's nice to kind of separate and say, hey, you've seen enough, and we'll share when we like.
Yeah, I love that. Rick Cole.
I agree. I think you definitely need to find the balance between showing, your customers who they're working with, because people want to work with people, right? They don't want to or buy from or engage with people, not necessarily not a product, right? If you put a person with it, then now they feel like they know the service or the product that they're purchasing. At the same time, you definitely want to have some balance. Again, they don't need to know your entire life story and travel with you 24/7. But definitely, if you put a person with it, it goes a long way.
Yeah, I agree. I think that and like you said, it's right now, marketing it kind of always was this way, but I think now more than ever before, people do business with people. And so they need to know the person behind, like, who's the creator. I want to see the team behind the scenes. Like, that's what really gets me, like, oh, I really feel connected to them. Oh, they get me. Like, they do that too. Oh, I thought only I were, so I think that I couldn't agree more with all of you on that. Okay, so we have one more question. This question is, do you think it's important to create a community or an experience behind your brand, whether you're professional services or whether you're a consumer goods product?
Absolutely. 100%. Experience is everything right now. Experience is everything. One of the tagline for our company is knowledge, clarity, superior service. And I had, initially, when we were developing Title Experts, I said that we wanted to be the Apple of title companies. And then I changed that. And the reason why I said Apple is because I said that Apple gave you what you did not know you needed or wanted, right? Like, touch screen, like, yeah, why wouldn't I have a touch screen phone? And yeah, why wouldn't I have AirPods? Like, why wouldn't I have an iPod? Like, yeah, you're right, I should have this. And one of my favorite quotes is Ford. He said, if I had, and this is a kind of a double back on Axe, but one of his famous quotes, he said, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And they're like, like, there's more to it than that. I can give you something better than that, right? And so that's where I initially looked to develop Title Experts, right? Because I felt like there was more that we could provide as title professionals to just the real estate industry itself, right? Then the advent of Amazon. And if you listen to Jeff Bezos, his main driver is the customer experience. It is all about he is customer centric. He's just obsessed with the customer. And if you focus on the customer, you'll always win. Everything now is about an experience. I mean, again, like, you look at everyone's social media, now it's all colorful and pictures and everything is just aesthetic and videos, because it's about the experience. It is so, you have to take, even if it's a pen, you have to take using this pen and experience, and people will remember. And one last thing I was talking about, and this kind of solidified this, I was talking with one of my best friends, and she's a commercial commercial real estate broker. And she said, Toys R Us would have lasted. And if anybody's on Toys R Us, any remnants, I apologize, RIP. But she said what Toys R Us needed to do, they were killed by people going online purchasing toys. She said if they would have put an experience in that store where the kids can come look at Build-A-Bear. Build-A-Bear, you come and build the bear in the store. Outside of that, it's just a teddy bear. Like, you can buy that on Amazon. She said if if Toys R Us would have thought to pivot and make themselves an experience where kids can come in and play with the toys, or it's just not all of them, but certain toys that they were going to purchase, they would have lasted.
Yeah.
You have to put experience in your business models now, if you want to last.
I would agree. Ray and Val would love your take on that.
Yeah, actually, I super agree with that. Experience is definitely important. So in our brick and mortar store, we actually have something called a plantate bar, where you can actually take our vases and succulents and actually plant it in like a garden type deal. But you can do it with friends, or you can do it by yourself. And hopefully, when the pandemic is over, we can actually expand more on it. But that's how we're offering an experience as well as our product.
I love that. That's so creative. So with that idea, was it something that you and Val came up with, or was it something that, you saw and you thought, hey, we can do our own version of it? Was it like, how did that idea come about?
I came up with the idea because I really am like a DIYer. So like I really like stores that offer stuff like that. I haven't seen one with like plant bars. Like I have seen stores where they take like a signature product and like you can create something there. And I guess I'm kid like that. So I was like, that'll be cool just to have people be able to plant cactus and succulents in our planters in the store. So
yeah, I love that. When everything is open, I'm gonna come and plant my own. We'll make it a girls trip. Okay. Yeah. Amber, would love your take on that question.
I mean, I echo what all the mentors have said. Timeless is absolutely an experience. It's a graduation, it's a celebration, it's a wedding, a birthday, just time with friends. This is timeless. So, if you want, our entire brand is built on an experience, a timeless experience, and also, timeless luxury. So it's a lifestyle luxury, and then it's an experience. Whatever experience you make that, then we want to embody it and embrace it and help you take it further. So that was a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Okay, so one final question for you all. When it comes to scaling, what do you see in the future? Do you see, like, let's say when everything's actually, back to normal, what do you see for the next steps for your business? And I'll start with you, Rachel.
We're going to continue to grow. We're actually going to push forward with this cloud-based title services. Like I said, this whole touchless, contactless, stay home, don't call me type thing. I mean, it is really there was already legislation in place for what we call remote online notarization, which is basically just the ability to sign closing documents electronically. That was already in place. The pandemic just really accelerated that. There are still some things that need to be done to roll that out even further, but it's coming. And because it's coming, we are 100% looking forward to building out a cloud-based title and settlement services company. I'm putting it out there. Be on the lookout for it because it has to happen. So yes.
I love it. Ray and Val would love to hear what's next for Talembert.
We kind of have two directions we want to head. We want to take. We do have another brick and mortar store opening in Pittsburgh this summer, but our next step would be hitting another city. So that would be one of our goals. And then also kind of expanding on our current product offerings, because we mainly just offer like candles and planters, but kind of expanding on our brand, keeping the same aesthetic and idea, but offering products outside of that.
And I will say, I saw something about a certain candle. I don't know if that's top secret yet. So about a candle that was a certain.
No, we have which candle? Which candle?
The one that's pink or blue.
Oh, that's top secret.
It's not a secret. You said it is top secret.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Okay. So then for Amber, what's next for Timeless Vodka?
Growth, absolutely. We were able to grow in 2020, and we're in 6 states. We've got 3 more states that should be onboarding in the next 90 or so days. So I'm really excited about that. And delegation. So that's really the growth and delegation are things that I am working on for 2021. But we cannot wait to really be a household name to where you can go into any store in any state, in any city, and be able to pick up a bottle of Timeless.
I love it. And it definitely seems like all of the things that we talked about are definitely happening. We're seeing them grow. So congratulations to each of you for not just starting a business, but really scaling it and really defying all the odds, or what some people thought were the odds. So Ray Cole, if people want to connect with you and learn more about Title Experts, where can they go?
For the company, go to www.titleexperts, that's title with an X, no E, .com. All of my contact information is there.
Awesome. Ray and Val?
Our website is www.talonbert.com. And then if you search Talonbert on all social media, our pages should pop up. So.
Love it. And you guys have a beautiful Instagram feed, just throwing that out there. Amber, if people would love to connect with you, where can they go?
Go to timelessvodka.com, but if you want to say hi or tag us in a product, search us on all social medias as well for Timeless Vodka.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Ray Cole, Ray and Val and Amber, thank you so much for joining us at the FutureProof Virtual Summit. I know that your insight has been invaluable and timeless. So thank you all.
I love that.
Bye. All right. What an amazing panel. So now we are going into, wasn't that just a great panel? So now we're going into panel number 3. And panel number 3, I have none other than Kai D. Wright, who's an amazing author, a lecturer, and also a business strategist. And what I love about Kai is that we have meeting of the mind when it comes to diversity, inclusion, especially when it comes to marketing and communications. So without further ado, let's kick off to panel number 3. Kai, welcome. So glad to have you here. Oh, we can't hear you. Wait, we can't hear you.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to see you again. Being able to catch up.
Definitely. So when it comes to, I want to just go ahead and jump right in. So when it comes to social justice, we've been seeing a lot of brands really stand and voice their opinion when it comes to social justice and corporate social responsibility. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think that looks like going forward. And also, is this a trend or is this something that's a new way of life?
You know, it's a great question. And I think it's a new way of life. I'll give you one statistic that demonstrates how consumers feel it's a new way of life. About 89% of them in September of 2020 felt that Black Lives Matter, just as one frame of reference for social justice, was not going away as an organization. And just to give you a sense of the momentum in which a lot of brands found themselves swept into by the summer of last year, the NAACP has been around for over 100 years. And we did a piece of research in September to try to figure out how many Americans, was familiar with what the NAACP stood for versus Black Lives Matter, right? Black Lives Matter really being kind of the younger cousin in terms of coalition of organizations. Same mission, right? Social justice, racial equity, but different approaches. And 92% of Americans knew what Black Lives Matter was, although it was only 8 years old by 2020. However, the number of Americans that knew what the NAACP was 77%. So it's not going away. It is a growing trend. It is galvanizing media attention. And it's really set to the backdrop of a major demographic shift that's happening. And so as we try to, future-proof our businesses, right? And look out. By 2040, the US Census projects that 90% of population growth will come from three audiences. That is Asian Americans, Latinx, as well as African Americans. And so we really have to, I think, lean forward into the notion that this is a trend, it's picking up, it's building momentum, and some companies may find themselves unready.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that that really is the essence of future proof, right? Like making sure that your business stands the test of time so that you know how to connect with multicultural audiences, you know how to connect with younger audiences as well. So I couldn't agree with you more. So when we're looking at what that looks like going forward, when we're talking about brands and brands really starting to make initiatives around cultural communications and around DE&I, what are some of the things that you're seeing that are actually working and helping them push those initiatives and helping them not only attract but also retain top talent within the organizations?
Yeah, well, I want to talk from a methodology standpoint first, and then I'm happy to give specific examples down to the company level. From a method standpoint, many executives and employees, they have a desire to change. And after teaching for almost a decade, volunteering and serving on diversity councils, task force on race, and being in the trenches of change, what I can say is there's 4 levels that change happens on. And so for organizations, I think it's important to recognize where you might have to do more work within these 4 areas. And so I think these 4 areas give a backdrop for what companies are doing well versus what companies still need to improve. The first one is the practices that you have, the processes that you use, the policies that you implement and protect, and then the programs that are initiatives to elevate. And so with those 4 things, right, practice, processes, policies, programs, you can think of them as a pyramid. And on the foundational level, it are the practices, the behaviors that people have. Those behaviors are how we treat each other, how we acknowledge contributions and contributors, and how we celebrate social identity. I think from a practices standpoint, some of the companies that I see do really well are, places like Netflix, where they empower you to bring your full social identity. And it is imperative to the stories that they tell. And so they're able to get very deep and specific. They're able to be authentic because individuals are manifesting positive behaviors amongst each other as a culture. When it comes to processes, that's the ways of working, right? So performance reviews are one example, making sure that they're not set to a certain standard, like a white or European standard in terms of how people speak, how they look, how they dress, as well as some of the more social elements of maybe how they spend their time, right? Sometimes we kind of frown when certain people say, oh, I went to the X, Y, and Z concert this weekend. All right, we have to get to a place of celebrating and embracing other individuals' cultures and expecting managers and leaders to do the same thing. The last 2 things are policies, right? Policies are rules. And so we really have to be careful to make sure that rules are equitable. How are projects or assignments given? Right? Is it based on favoritism or is it based on objectivity? Is it based on someone's background or is it based on someone's proximity to a leader? Same thing with a lot of representation of companies. Sometimes minorities have a very hard time doing media interviews or being the one doing speaking engagements on behalf of their companies. But that visibility matters just as much as posting a black square in social media, right? One action is very static. Another action is very active and shows thought leadership. And so we really have to think, how do we enable and empower people to show up? The last one's programs. And very simply, any program, whether it's an internship program, and some individuals, such as the CEO of Merck, has said that he wants to very rigorously see internship programs go to about 50% minority, right? If we're thinking of how we're going to solve a lot of social justice problems with corporate America specifically, we have to think bigger and bolder and in terms of cohort type hiring. And so, mentorship programs are the same way. We saw a number of mentorship programs with women pop up over the last few years. And that has led to a number of individuals being able to enter into the C-suite. We've seen Starbucks with Melody Hobson, right? Someone who definitely does not need to be mentored, but she became the chair. And when companies start putting minority leaders first and forefront and out front in terms of especially individuals that are intersectional, then I think we're going to see a lot of progress.
I agree. And I love what you said. When it comes to the programming, it's really important. Well, there are a lot of elements of what I love what you said. I do definitely agree. I think the programming is definitely important. And I also think in that programming, having a plan of this is what that ascension looks like. This is what, and really being able to show other people, both not just inside the organization, but externally as well, communicating what your company is doing to really be a part of change, the change that is essentially happening regardless when it comes to diversity. So I love that. So when it comes to when we're talking about media specifically, because we're both in the media marcom space, a lot of times brands don't necessarily. One thing that I hear a lot is, I feel like that brand doesn't necessarily represent me. What are some of the things that you think brands can do? And we've talked a little bit about this, but what are some of the things that brands can do to really be able to show that they are inclusive, that they celebrate diversity, they encourage diversity, both internally and externally from a communication standpoint?
Yeah. I'm going to give the example of, what we do at Columbia, because I think as an educational institution, it's fairly neutral, right? Doesn't challenge what a corporate environment might be doing. It gives some examples, and educational environments tend to be good at experimentation with different programs. They tend to understand that things have to change and adopt. And they also tend to be more diverse than corporate environments in the sense of international students, as well as different individuals of socioeconomic backgrounds coming together. So, one thing in terms of visibility is around, access and pipeline. And I think many companies have to rethink where they're showing up and if they are going to where their consumers or potential employee base is located. In when we look at certain populations like the Black population, McKinsey published a really robust study earlier this week on the state of minorities in private sector. And they hyper focused on the Black experience. What they found is 60% of Black people live in the South. So if we're talking about media, right, most major media markets are New York, LA, they're more coastal, Chicago, they're in the Midwest. And so where a company is located and where a company goes to try to find consumers and individuals to bring into the community of that company, it's important. Meet people where they are. The last panel, what was so great is, they all talked about experience. And when it comes to experience, it's important to, understand and acknowledge that people bring different social identities. And so at Columbia, we do a different type of training, right? Instead of doing a training on anti-racism or anti-sexism, which tends to put one identity at a time, race or gender, in the forefront, they take a different approach. And they really look at it from the standpoint of all of the different social identities that someone can have, right? About 10, 12 different ones, and how they operate at the same time, how they clash or might clash at the same time. And then how you actively adjust the experience so that there's a culture and an atmosphere where everyone feels like they belong and everyone feels like they are included. And that only comes through recognition that there are different social identities. And so the more we name, right, the problem, I think that's the first, step of, forming new habits, overcoming addictions, kind of changing things that are unfavorable. You have to address it. You have to name it. And then you have to start to shape it, figure out, is it a big problem, small problem, quantify it, measure it, and then start to enact changes. And so for many organizations, they're still in the beginning stages of their maturity. They still need to name the problem, and they still need to take stock of who is in the room and how that it impacts all of the ways that they operate as a company.
I love that. I love that. And I think too, when it comes to what you were saying about making sure that you have multiple people in the room as far as different cultures and diversity as a whole, what the beauty of that really is that you're really able to see all those different perspectives, because my upbringing could have looked very different from yours. The things that the holidays that I celebrate may look different from yours, but if we actually create a space where we can talk about those and have those discussions, I feel like is a healthy thing to do. So I love that. So with that being said, Kai, when we're talking about organizations, and you mentioned about mentorship, is there a way for, or what are some best practices that organizations can do right now? We talked a little about this earlier in the Bringing Culture to the Boardroom panel, but would love to hear your take on how organizations can really drive diversity through mentorship, and not just diversity, but really the elevation or the ascension for leadership and management roles when it comes to diversity.
Yeah. There was a piece of research that I did for Work, which owns or is owned by the same company of Cannes Lions Festival, right? The creative awards that many individuals within advertising, marketing, communication strive to get. So we set that kind of as gold standard. And what we found through the research of talking to 1,000 different Americans was that they had expectations that a company would make available multiple options, multiple pathways towards progress, right? And so mentorship is one of those main things. And many individuals wanted the mentorship to be reverse, right? So that there was as much of an impact on, Gen Z to other individuals, because what we found often in the research was the values that Gen Zers and millennials bring to a workplace does not align always to the values of senior leadership. And so we try to reconcile those two things, and we've been seeing the reconciliation of those two things through ESG, right? Environmental social governance. And ultimately, the way that a lot of leaders have manifest what are those values that we need to have is to say, all right, we can agree across generations that doing what's in the best interest of communities, whether it's from a climate standpoint or socioeconomic standpoint, is good business. Now, how entangled certain contracts might be in legacy parts of the business, or certain processes might be vary. But I think there's mutual agreement between the BlackRocks of the world that own so many companies and are investors, and employees and shareholders and civil rights activists, that we have to start investing more in having individuals get the exposure that's needed at the senior level. And there has to be a willingness of individuals that are doing the mentoring that they may not have the answers. They may not have the solutions. And so I think there's a lot of executives that find themselves in a vulnerable position, and that's fine, right? Brene Brown teaches us that vulnerability is the opportunity to display courage. And if you are going to be a leader of an organization, this is an issue that requires courage and is an opportunity to grow and evolve and mature even more. And so those that are fortunate enough, and I say fortunate enough because I think it is a huge opportunity to learn from younger generations to learn from people who may be a peer, but may be other, right? May be a minority, may not look like the majority of people in the room. Those are mentorship opportunities too. Because at the end of the day, it's about exposing individuals so that they can raise their cultural consciousness, exposing them to things that are different than the predominant culture that they may have around them. And so when we think about mentoring, it is one of many, many, many solutions, but it's one that we have to critically look at as an opportunity to remediate some of the individuals that are senior leaders also. So my stance on mentorship is a little bit different than the, what business lessons can you learn from individuals? Because often with mentorship, we try to get mentees to imitate and mimic the behavior of senior leaders. And when it comes to social justice and brand activism, a lot of senior leaders are just now raising their or awakening their consciousness to the problem. So they're not necessarily the leaders when it comes to those areas. I think we're going to find that a lot of youth and a lot of individuals that are other are going to have a lot of influence up.
I agree. And I also think that when it comes to diversity, there also needs to be, and when we talked about mentee and mentor, the age, right? So when the pandemic hit, a lot of people were saying, I don't know how to do this. I'm not tech savvy. I don't know how to use Zoom and all those different things. So I think that it really created an opportunity for younger people within organizations to really shine essentially and really show value and show how they can be a part of the solution and really drive that innovation and helping the company be more agile. So I love that perspective. So Kai, would love to talk a little bit about your book. So you recently wrote a book and would love for you to share what the premise behind it was and what was the motivation, why you thought it needed to be written and out there in the world right now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of different things that I try to do to make sure that other individuals see a pathway for themselves. Sometimes it is volunteering, sometimes it's teaching, sometimes it's doing speaking. But in the case of the book, it was writing. And it was taking a lesson from one of my mentors, Andre Harrell, who unfortunately passed away, may rest in power, last year. And many people may know his name because he discovered Diddy, hired him, famously fired him, helped him start his career in terms of Bad Boy, discovered Mary J. Blige, discovered Robin Thicke, and a number of other individuals, was president of Motown, etc. Right? Big person and personality in music. And whether you was a music artist or an executive and in a former career, I worked for Diddy, he would pull me to the side and say, as a Black person, it is critical that you have a point of view, that you are ready to deliver when asked for it. And so I really took that to heart years and years ago and tried to find a platform to say, what is a point of view that I could authentically talk about? And, I always got the same question in terms of personal branding, having worked for celebrities or working for Fortune 100 companies, which is when you're doing brand building, what is most important, right? Startups don't have a lot of money, and entrepreneurs and individuals often don't have a lot of time or specialized skill to know what they should communicate about themselves or how to position themselves. And big companies have a lot of money, but they often have competing priorities. And so the one commonality that I found between people, nonprofits, brands of all sizes was the thing that turbocharges your brand to grow and get you an unfair share of recognition and love back from a community is how you make people feel. And so I wrote the book as an ode to feelings, and to refocus and recenter us as humans, that we cannot get so caught up in the data and in the demographics and in the numbers that take away a lot of the emotion and humanity in history of who we are and the social identities that we're showing up with. And so, the book gives communicators and non-communicators a pretty simple framework of how to, tap into the zeitgeist of a culture that they're trying to communicate with and a community that they're trying to connect with. And so I've enjoyed the process of finding my voice, even as someone who's taught for almost 10 years and someone who has advised, really big names of people. I encourage everyone to try to find what that message is that they have. And it took me a while, right? So I say that as someone, and I know as an author, Courtney also, it is very powerful, I think, to be able to represent a point of view and encourage other individuals to own their narrative also.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I really do love, I've been enjoying reading your book and I'm not done with it yet. I'm really going deep in the book and making sure that I reread some parts as well, which I love. I always love books that make you want to reread that last chapter, that last couple pages. So thank you for that. But I do agree. I think that it's important when we're talking about finding a voice, that you find a voice and you also, you connect with other brands that also represent your voice, or brands that you feel understand your perspective or actually care about your perspective, not in a way that, we're, and we see things go wrong in commercials and all that stuff all the time, but really actually are making a concerted effort to really understand all of their customers. Right. No matter what they look like, no matter what the age is of the customer, but they're making a concerted effort. So with that being said, Kai, when we're talking about diversity from the standpoint of having your brand voice, do you think it's important for brands to publicly promote those different voices within their messaging, or do you think it's more important for them to do it internally as opposed to externally? Is there one that should be done first, or is there should they both be? Should there be a concerted effort to roll out that messaging at the same time?
Yeah, I think we're in a unique period where both needs to happen simultaneously. Companies are finding themselves in a position where consumers have a lot of time to be online and check receipts, and they're looking for receipts. That's what they're doing, and that's what they're discussing. So the companies that don't have them glaringly stand out. And the companies that do, I think those communities around the companies are getting an opportunity to defend those companies, right? And so Nike is more defensible as a company based on simply what they've been communicating that they're doing because they're communicating, right? So I think if companies want their consumers or employees to defend their actions, then they need to start having some sense of public transparency and accountability, even for actions that they consider micro actions. When we think of all of the audiences that are receiving that communication, shareholders is one also. And shareholders want to see accountability, not only from an ESG standpoint, but we also know from a data standpoint, based on work that McKinsey did on analyzing S&P company performance years ago, is that companies that are diverse in terms of their leadership have better returns. And so people are not only looking for those good deeds, those goodwill things about what's happening in the community, but they also want to know that from an economic standpoint, that the diversity is there. And I'll give you one more just reason from a business operations standpoint that companies internally want to promote what they're doing so they can attract people who are going to say, that's not good enough, or people who have ideas of what to do. Often when problems get solved from a corporate standpoint, whether it is any type of professional services organization, media organization, it lives within leadership. And leadership across all these companies are very homogenous. There's research that was done by Franz Johansson for a book called The Medici Effect. And basically what he has argued in that over the last 15 years is when you bring people with different backgrounds together, they can better solve a problem, right? So if there's a health problem, for instance, you get a team of doctors or scientists together, they're going to be limited in their ability to determine solutions. If you bring together a nurse, a school teacher, a pharmacist, a bus driver, someone else from the grocery, the perspective that they're going to have based on the different experiences that they have in life is going to lead to a very different solution. And so that's the kind of thinking that we need within many organizations is how do you bring together as many disparate groups as possible so that you can get to a solution that best works for everyone and accounts for the blind spots that other people have. Now, what that means internally is you have to open up the seat at the table to more people than you think, because if you only open it up to friendly people, those are only going to be people who want to preserve and protect the system. And fundamentally, the system is broken. And that we know it's broken based on the outcomes that are being produced. And so to give you an example in professional services, in the last 25 years, the number of Black people that have increased in professional services, this is advertising, marketing, PR, consulting, 2%. 2 percentage point increase in 25 years. That is the rate of change. Now, where economists predict it should be in terms of all the missing jobs, right? About 380,000 missing jobs that McKinsey has quantified that Black people should have within professional services that they don't. It would take until 2050 at the current rate in order to get to the place that economists say is fair and equitable in terms of the share of jobs. And so companies are going to have to get really uncomfortable, and they're going to have to stop giving the seat at the table to the people who are trying to protect the system that's broken.
Wow. That's and I love what you said about, when we actually really have to have an honest conversation about what's going on, and really, again, I love the idea of creating these spaces for healthy and safe conversation around what's broken and ways to fix it. And I think that just has to continue to happen as we continue to grow, both as a country and just also as diversity continues to be it's just essential. It's just what's going to happen. So I love that. So Kai, as we wrap up, I do have one follow-up question for you. So there's a famous quote that says, when you get to the top, don't forget to send the elevator back down. Is that a strategic plan in your opinion? And how can people really send the elevator back down as we as a society continue to all try to rise together?
That is a really, really great question. I philosophically 1000% agree that is the only way, right? We go so far by ourselves, and often we're standing on the shoulders of other individuals. And so I think it's very important to have that acknowledgement that as far as we might go ourselves, it's not because of the individual accomplishments that we may have, but rather the things that people before us have been willing to endure and sacrifice in order to get there. And so I think when we start to remember that others went through the fire and they paved the pathway, then it's imperative. So for me, I try to give back in 3 ways. Teaching is one of those things. We don't have enough individuals of varying backgrounds. I won't even say of color, just of varying backgrounds in terms of social identities that are intersectional specifically, that are in the classroom and that are in front of future leaders of organizations, in front of future journalists and programmers. And so for me, it was very important that part of my solution of giving back was making sure that I went into spaces that often are quite homogeneous in terms of literature, in terms of case studies, in terms of thought leadership, in terms of who is setting the standard, essentially. Also volunteering. I live in Harlem. I'm a very proud New Yorker.
I love it.
And I try to volunteer a lot. And so, I've chosen a local school, Harlem Children's Zone, have volunteered for years with them, and just find the opportunity. I've done career panels, go and do career days, talk to students, sit at tables, and have done networking days of inviting and hosting at Ogilvy individuals, students in college coming in and getting used to just having mocktails and cheese with senior executives, so that when they're in that environment for conferences or other things, they understand how to do it. And those things are really pleasurable. We've invited people in our network to do job shadowing. And job shadowing, I think, is really great. And one of those things, like mentoring, that can have a big impact. And so, we 2 years ago, for Take Our Sons and Daughters to Work Day, recognized that fourth Thursday in April, that has been around for 20 plus years, that Gloria Steinem started for Day for Girls, and then expanded for boys, and now for just youth in general. Multicultural minority youth are often missing because their parents are often the receptionists. Their parents are often in some other role where they don't feel as if they can bring their children into the environment. And so we pushed really hard and worked with Harlem Children's Zone in order to send students to Spotify and Samsung and Complex and a number of different organizations within media, within advertising, different agencies, so that they can start to get the same level of opportunity and exposure as someone who might have a child that they can take, right? And so I encourage everyone, as that's coming up, and as we really think about how do we celebrate, Black History Month, and outside of the month of February, when it comes to April and Take Our Sons and Daughters to Work Day, take someone else's kid to work with you virtually, right? Do that. That is very easy and possible for you to do. And that level of exposure is also mentorship. Mentorship doesn't have to be formal in the sense of sitting with someone for an hour and answering questions. It can be letting someone watch you do what you do and just watch you shine and see the respect and the level of impact that you have on your everyday basis. And so those are the things that I found really help individuals that are in middle school and high school and college to get to a place of confidence where they not only feel qualified and interested, but they feel as if the industry of media and entertainment and communication that they want to go into is ready to accept them.
Yeah, definitely. I can tell you one of the most rewarding things of my career has been having several mentees and starting with them in middle school, and now they're in the Marcom space. And so it's been so rewarding because you don't really see that much diversity specifically in marketing and media and advertising. So I think that what you said about being a mentor and starting as young as you can, I think makes all the difference in being able to see, the saying, you can't be what you can't see. I think that you can be what you can't see. I think that it just makes you more confident to step into that if you can actually see it and you can identify a path for yourself. So I love that you're doing that.
Yeah. And a quick closing thing about the diversity piece. The most watched thing on television is the Super Bowl. So just to focus on that as a closing thought, right? The Super Bowl is kind of America's prime stage. 100 million people tends to watch. It tends to be a unifier. From a marketing, advertising, communication, PR standpoint, it is the industry's Super Bowl also, right? Most people want to say that they did something that tangentially touched it, whether it's an event, a forum, a party, or big activation for a brand. Yeah, when we think about Super Bowl commercials, out of the 50 plus, I think about 60 this year, less than 5 were directed by women. 0 were directed by minority-owned agencies and Black-owned agencies. So, let's keep that in mind about how much further we have to go. There is progress that is being made, but by no means does the 1,000 brands that signed Stop Hate for Profit last year, or put up a black square, or put out a public statement, that is not the finish line that employees and consumers are demanding. The finish line is when we have a different economic outcome of pay parity. The finish line is when the numbers are at parity where they should be, when we get to that additional 25%, that additional 2% within Black. And it's different for other groups, but it is still needing to have progress, right? And the finish line is when we get to 2040 and the majority minority that now is in the country feels a sense of belonging, right? Because it's very different when we can instill that sense of belonging in someone. And ultimately, I think that's the metric that we're trying to get to. Amongst all the consumer surveys, employee surveys, other surveys, I would really say hyper focus on getting individuals to a place where they feel like they belong within your portfolio as a customer, as a consumer, and they belong in your spaces and environments as an employee also.
Yeah. And as a supplier, actually do business with the people who are making your brand a success. So I love that. I love that. So Kai, as we wrap up, if listeners or watchers, I should say viewers, if they want to connect with you, where can they go? And definitely let them know where they can go and get a copy of your amazing book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am very active on LinkedIn. If you want to join the individuals there that are getting daily advice and perspective and trend research, then feel free to look me up. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Kai Wright, which is just my name. But also be sure to follow Blacklist 100. We created that as a platform to celebrate culture makers and thought leaders on a daily basis all year long. And so if you just need inspiration, if you want to aspire, if you need ideas to see what's moving within culture, then follow at Blacklist 100 across social channels also. And then the book is Follow the Feeling, Brand Building in a Noisy World. You can get it the same place you can get Courtney's book, FutureProof, Amazon, and everywhere else.
Awesome. Awesome. Kai, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation, definitely enlightening. And I know based on all the tweets I'm getting that people are finding great value in it. So thank you for joining us at the FutureProof Virtual Summit.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Bye now. Wasn't that a great conversation? Loved it, loved it, loved it. Okay, so as we go into our next panel, which is all about the new rules to networking, I'm excited to bring on a longtime friend of mine, 2-time best-selling author, and true master of networking, none other than Alicia Reese. Alicia, hey, welcome to the FutureProof Virtual Summit. So excited for you to be here.
I'm excited too. How are you?
We're good. So everyone has been talking about this new rules to networking. What does it look like in 2021? I don't know what I'm doing, but before we jump into all the details, I would love for you to give our viewers a quick run through of who Alicia Reese is and what your brilliant zone is.
Absolutely. So I love that question, the brilliant zone. You might want to trademark that if it's not already.
It's already trademarked. Sorry.
Oh, darn. As long as it's trademarked by you, that's all that matters. But no, so I am Alicia Reese, and I am equal parts warm tea and Hennessy. I take my personality with me everywhere I go. So prepare yourself. But I am a strategist, author, and founder. I'm the principal for 360 Gateway Brands, RGLP Group, and then also the co-founder of True Yoga Agency. My genius zone is honestly in that I am a strategist through and through. And I leverage the authenticity of my brand to build some dynamic, game-changing relationships that have allowed me to host events, partner with, and lead the strategic development for organizations such as Progressive, UPS, BET, Vogue Italia, Verizon, Essence. Will be here all night long if I name them all, but some pretty dope folks. So I'm just really excited to be here.
Yeah. So I love that. I love your intro, but what I really love is that you really have like dominated in networking. And it's something that a lot of people struggle with and something that is very important to do, whether you're navigating internally inside an organization or if you're on your own as an entrepreneur. So can you talk to people specifically, and you've written a whole best-selling book on it called The Relationship Game, but can you give us an idea and a overview of what the relationship game looks like? And then if we can go over maybe your number one step, the first step, I should say, when it comes to developing relationships and what that looks like now in 2021 versus what it looks like maybe in 2019 pre-pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I wrote the book, The Relationship Game, primarily because people kept asking me questions. And I'm a firm believer in, if people are constantly or consistently asking you, well, how did you do it? What did you do? So that you don't have to keep repeating yourself, economies of scale. Time is precious. I was like, well, I'm just going to write another book to literally write down what my strategy is for building and developing relationships, like what it looks like, how I do it, and then how others can do the same thing. And so for me, whenever you're looking to develop relationships, especially relationships that are focused on progress, you want to tap first into who you are and what value you bring to the table. A lot of times people forget that everything is about mutually beneficial relationships. In a world full of liabilities, you have to showcase and see, how can I become an asset? And consistently asking someone, will you be my mentor? Will you be my sponsor? Will you? You're now looked at as a liability because you're focused on taking. But if you flip the script and focus instead on how do I show up providing enough value or providing so much value that they are excited to connect with me, come to me, they answer my phone calls, they answer my emails because they trust that I'm going to bring something valuable to the table, that is where you start. Figure out what your value proposition is. And it's not that deep to where you have to go and do, mathematical equations. It's literally just writing on a piece of paper. What am I good at? Where do I excel? Start there.
Yeah, I love that. And I couldn't agree more. And we've had conversations about this. I think that a really great mentee is also a really great mentor. And what I mean by that is you also bring something to the table. You're, like you said, you're not just taking, you're saying, hey, and this is one thing that I've done for almost every single one of my mentors is I say, hey, I did an audit of your brand and this is what, these are some ways that I can help you. Or, hey, let's design your website or let's, book you for this. And so that way I'm coming to it as, hey, I want to learn from you, but we can learn from each other. And it's like a partnership. And, and that way they see the benefit. It's not just, oh, every time this person calls, they always, it's all about them. Because I think that all the best friendships, relationships are ones that are mutually beneficial. So
yeah, there needs to be some reciprocity. And I feel like people think because the person may make more than them or they're in a position that's higher than them, that they can't help them. And the very opposite is true. And I'm going to tell a very quick story. And this is absolutely one that I want you guys to write down because it's a pro tip. And I've used it on multiple occasions to close, 5 and 6 figure deals. So here we go. I had met a woman, Essence used to call her the $20 billion woman. And I had met her at an event that she was speaking at. And so I took my notes. I was listening intently to what she was doing. That's another thing too. Listen. Don't listen to respond. Listen to comprehend and to understand, to see where they need help and where you can possibly insert yourself using the value you bring to the table in order to present yourself as an asset, not a liability. But now back to the story. So she was speaking at the event, and I simply, after the event, I went up to her and I was like, you know what? You don't know it yet, but you and I are going to be really good friends. And I heard you say that you have an event that's happening in, Ohio. I was like, do you have an operations, person or someone a production manager, someone who's going to be doing your run of show at your event? And she was like, I don't. And I said, oh, again, because I know the value I brought to the table. I was like, well, I would love to volunteer to do it for you. She's like, well, I don't have, the additional budget. And I said, I didn't ask you for a budget. I said, I would love to assist you. And so she looked at me like, well, okay, sure. Now, because I offered to assist, that meant she had to give me her email and her number. So a couple days passed. I hit her up. Hey, so great meeting you. Just letting you know, I booked my flight and my hotel. It gets in at this time. So please let me know what you'll need in advance of the event so I can ensure that everything is set for you and you have a smooth event. She texted me back like, what did you just, what just happened here? Because who does that, right? Crazy people, me, but not crazy in a bad way, crazy I'm clear on the fact that I am a game changer. I bring something to the table, something I know you need. And because I value the relationship, I want to help how I can, not because I'm expecting you, because I had nothing to ask her. I didn't want anything from her at that time. I just knew I could look and see that this person is going to be a phenomenal person to have a relationship with. Build the relationship before you need it.
Yes.
So I flew. Yeah, build it before you need it. I flew to Ohio. Literally, I don't think I had ever been to Ohio at that time. I flew to Ohio by myself. I had my flat out of heels from Don Dixon and some sneakers. I put it on and I got down. I was in the trenches. How can I help? Where can I assist? From that, one action to this day. And that was, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know how long ago. It was years ago when I moved. Actually, that was 7 years ago. When I moved to New York, I was having such a hard time. I was really, really struggling. My sister and I, at that point, we were eating 1 meal a day so that my daughter could have 3. We were really, really struggling financially. And she called me one day and she was like, how are you? And I had to be really, really vulnerable and cry and tell her, like, I don't know if this move to New York was a good idea. I'm straight struggling. And she was like, give me a moment. I'll call you right back. She made some phone calls and she called me back and she was like, do you know Zendaya? I was like, of course I know Zendaya. I have a child who loves her. And she's like, oh, great. You still do marketing, right? I'm like, yeah. I still do marketing and branding. And she's like, okay, great. She set me up with an interview with the person who was running the everything for her fashion brand that was about to go to market. And by about, I don't mean a month or so. I mean, we had a little runway. And so I went to interview with them that following Tuesday. And by Thursday, I had the opportunity working with them. And that was my first 6-figure contract, simply because I had built a relationship 2 years or a year, before I needed it. Leveraging my value, being an asset, not a liability. I have never asked her to be my mentor, but she has not only been a mentor, she's been a sponsor, she's been a confidant, she's been a trusted resource. And so that was the pro tip. So I hope you wrote that down. Create your own way of how you're going to do it. But I mean, that was the 2019 version of how I connected.
Okay, so I love that. And I couldn't agree more. Definitely make the relationships before you need them, and really have that foresight to say, okay, you know what? This is how I can help this person. I always like to call mine the target 100, and they could be 100 dream clients. They could be 100 100 future mentors. It looks different for every
Absolutely.
But then if you're able to create those relationships ahead of time, then you're really able to set yourself up for success when you need the opportunities. And if you're always sowing those seeds, you'll always be able to eat. You know?
Absolutely. And you're all in my post this morning. I know you haven't read it because you've been busy with your event, but literally this morning I said, you can't harvest from seeds you never planted. There's no way. And people think that harvest means chill time. No, if you know anything about farming, when they say it's time to harvest, that's where you get to, reap the benefits of the work that you've put in, but there's still more work to do. But you can't, pluck out a flower if you never planted the seed for the flower to bloom. That's backwards. How is that supposed to work out? There's nothing in the ground. So you need to continuously, lay those seeds, build on. Don't always be an ask hole, ASK, where you're always asking, can I have, give me this, give me, because it gets exhausting. Instead, put yourself or be in a position of how can I assist you? I reached out to a woman who I actually do want to be a sponsor for me. And I reached out to her because I noticed she had a book that was launching. And I said, this again, before I knew I wanted it, or that I needed her for something, just something in my spirit, because I'm a firm believer in listen to your gut, said, reach out to her, see what you can do to assist her. I reached out to her and it was just like, hey, I noticed you're launching or you have a new book coming out. How can I assist you? What do you need? Where can I show up for you? It's not that, she necessarily needed me because she had a team, but she didn't realize it. We were able to come up together with a really creative idea as to how she can get even more eyes on her book. And now she's started to execute on that. And I'm excited to see where that goes. But now she asked me, well, now what can I do for you? Because you have to understand, when you lead with and through abundance, understanding that the more you give out, the more that just comes back to you, whether it's from that person or another one, that reciprocity, that type of energy that you put into the universe, it always comes back to you. But if you're constantly hoarding, like, no, I need, you're going to always need something.
I love that. The pendulum always swings the other way, right? So if you're giving, then it's inevitable. It's going to come back to you. So I love that. I love that. So we talked about a 2019 version of what power networking looks like. Can you talk about what that looks like and how it shifted to 2021? There's no more in-person or very limited in-person. From what I'm hearing and some of the feedback I'm getting, and just in forums and groups I'm a part of as well, people are saying they have Zoom fatigue. I don't really love being on camera. I don't really know how to connect I don't want to slide into people's DMs. Is that even okay professionally? Like, people people aren't able to see the people who they may have known they wanted to connect with in person, and they have no idea how to do it online now. So can you give people an action plan and a light action plan of how, or just some steps that they can take to really build those relationships online now?
Absolutely. So I am a firm believer in, growth is found in the uncomfortable place. So if it makes you uncomfortable sliding into someone's DMs, do it. Slide. It's snowing up here. Well, not today, but it snows up north where I live. So if you've ever seen anyone go snow tubing, that's the energy that I want you to embody when you're sliding into someone's DMs. Put a nice smile on your face. When you snow tube and you going down that hill, it's a little scary. It's totally fine. Just hang on tight and slide away. But what it can look like so that it's much more intentional is, I'm a firm believer in create a hit list of the people that you want to connect with. And then with that hit list, attach next to it, what or how do you want to work with them, impact what they're doing, or assist or have them assist you in whatever growth it is that you're looking for. Figure out and be specific about what it is that you want, because especially in these times where you have mothers, fathers, and caretakers who are now whole chefs, housekeepers, nannies to their own kids, and also teachers, they're busy. So don't do the hemming and hawing and wasting their time. I slid into 3 people's DMs yesterday because, again, and this is another pro tip, it works. I promise it works. But I slid into their DMs And I said, hey, I'm creating a LinkedIn series, because you do not have to have a website to create an interview series. You can use LinkedIn publishing. So I created a LinkedIn series that I'm going to talk to quite a few entrepreneurs, and then also hybrid folks about how they have leveraged, the power of their brand to be successful. Like, what have they done? How has that been a game changer for them, having a powerful brand? And I slid into all their DMs asking them that question. And my goal is to build relationships. Not only do I want to hear their stories, but I also want to build relationships with them. If you don't feel comfortable just sliding in without anything to talk about, create a series, or, ask questions, especially if you want to, let's say you want to work with their company, ask them, what would you say has been the most, especially if they're in the human resources department, what has been the most successful people who have interviewed with you? What would you say is the one or two most important, attributes that they had? I believe that all people are brilliant. It's just tapping into that brilliance and figuring out, and use Google. If you can't figure out how to network virtually or remotely, Google. They've got some really great tips. Pick out some that work for you. Mine always is to create some sort of an interview series to talk to them about, so that I can have an actual conversation with them. Another way is events like these. You get to see who the speakers are. If you've been wanting to connect with one of those speakers before the event, slide in their DMs or send them an email and say, hey, I saw that you're going to be doing this event at this time on this day. I would love if I could capture the event for you, to capture some of the behind the scenes, of you speaking. I'd love to send that to you once it's over, so that you can use it to highlight what you've done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah. And so, and I agree. I think that whenever you can create something that you're interviewing people, that's a great way to build the relationship. And people love to share their story. And a lot of people don't publicly share it unless they're asked to. So I think that that's a great way to do it for sure. And so when we're talking about social media, because that's really the essential way to build your brand in 2021. When we're talking about that, specifically from a professional standpoint, do you feel like it's still professional to connect with people outside of LinkedIn? So do you think that it's okay to connect with someone on Facebook or even on Instagram and build the relationship there? Or do you have like a formula that you say, okay, well, you have to start here on LinkedIn, or you have to start on, by email or at an event? Or do you have a process that you follow specifically?
So I'm a firm believer that people forget that professionals are humans first. And so because they forget that they're humans first, they try to put on this air or this facade of perfectionism, like, oh, I'm always professional. I never twerk. I never say bad words. And I never listen to music that I should not, or that the kids can't hear too. That's just not accurate. You're human. They are too. My deepest connections have been found in anchoring myself in exactly who I am. And so for me, people usually are more themselves on those differing platforms. But because I want to tap into both aspects, because unfortunately still most people keep, their fun life separate from their professional life, I usually like to tap into both. Like, one of the dopest folks I ever met, and was actually from a conference that I had gone to, and I closed 6 figures in deals and in contracts from that conference. It was in Hawaii. But I met her, and it was a 5-figure deal that I closed with her for a client. I met her on the dance floor while we both were dancing together. I refuse to say what the name of the song was, but just know it's highly inappropriate in a professional setting. But I was being myself, and me being myself allowed her, this huge, high level, C-suite professional, to be herself, because you give people the space to be themselves. And so much in today's society requires people to put on a mask to be this person. So when you provide a safe space for them to be themselves, by, showcasing and highlighting who you are, for me, I'm not just the buttoned up professional. The same professional that can close a 6, working on 7-figure deal is the same professional who can, rap all the lyrics to a Jay-Z song. Like, I'm the same person. And so because I'm the same, it's, multi-hyphenate, pseudo rapper. No, I'm just kidding. But no, multi-hyphenate. So because of that, for me, I like to connect more than just on LinkedIn, because I am about people, like actual real people. All the fake stuff, you could keep it, you could have it. I'm good, love, and joy. I like people. So yeah, I connect on multiple platforms.
Awesome. I think that for me, one thing I like to do is I like to start on LinkedIn. And then if we can take it off LinkedIn, one thing that I like to do is I like to get people on a phone. But, it has to start somewhere, because you just can't cold call people anymore. If you're anything like me, you have spam filters on your phone, or you don't pick up unknown numbers. But when it comes to networking, and this will be my final question for you before we take Q&A. But when it comes to networking, do you think that there is a point where you can be too aggressive with your networking outreach? Because, there's a fine line between professionalism and, it's just too much. And so I think that some people need a little bit of guidance on that. Any insight?
Absolutely. So you don't want to scare people. That's never been a good thing. We don't want to scare folks. But what that line looks like is if you've emailed someone on a Monday, Tuesday is not when you should be following up. It's just not. It's just not. Give them until Thursday. Follow up with maybe you saw something that they posted on LinkedIn. So comment on that. You saw that they recently won an award. Or one of the things that one of my good girlfriends did, she submitted one of these C-suite executives for an award, and the lady actually won it. This C-suite executive, she actually won the award. And so she reached out to her to let her know, hey, I submitted you for this award because I think you're dope. I think you're powerful. I think you're all these things. And I would love to connect with you to talk through what accepting the award will look like, when you'll need to do it, that whole 9 yards. Again, if you lead with value, people usually are willing to respond. The super aggressive, sending multiple emails, if they haven't responded to you and it's been 2 weeks and you've sent 2 or 3 emails, give it a month. They could be going through something. They could be overwhelmed, especially during these times. Give it some time and allow them to follow up. Connect with them, or comment on, maybe a post they made on LinkedIn, or a post or something, a tweet that they tweeted on Twitter, because it could just be, they just hadn't yet had the time to get back to you. So by connecting with them in multiple avenues, it allows you to put it to the top of their list without being super aggressive.
I love it. Okay, so we have one question. We have a couple, but we're only going to go through a couple. So this is one question from Twitter. What would you say the best relationship that you've been able to build online? What has it been?
Okay. So the best relationship that I have been able to build online, there have been a couple, so I'm going to see which one it is. Actually, would be one of my business partners. When we met, we didn't really have as much time to connect or get together, but we followed each other, and then we just kept building. We would send each other DMs and funny things and this, that, and the third. And then later we wrote a book together. It sold quite a bit. And she's now a really good friend, and we even just launched a podcast together. But when we met, we didn't have time to connect then. But later we connected deeper, and now it's led to some really, really amazing opportunities for us that I'm excited to watch grow.
I love it. Okay, one more question that we have. If you could say your top 3 tips, and we may have already gone over this, but it says if you can share your top 3 tips for networking today, what would they be, and in what order?
So the first one is, anytime you walk into a room, I don't care if it's a virtual room, understand the room is transformed simply because you're in it. Hard stop, period. Confidence wins the game almost all the time. Number one. Number two, know exactly what it is that you're bringing to the table and how you would like to execute. Like, I know anytime I'm coming into a room, I want to show people how to leverage their brand genius using a playbook that allows them to rinse and repeat, grow, scale, and explore. Like, I'm super clear on it. So when I enter into a room, I'm so confident in who I am and what I bring to the table that it brings people to me. And this literally happened on Friday. I was at dinner and I was dancing, and this woman came up to me and she was just like, I don't know who you are, but I know we need to stay connected. She and I are having dinner on Tuesday in New York. And this is a dynamic woman who has built over a $40 million beauty brand. And literally, because I enter every room rooted in who I am, I draw energies to me. And then the last one would be to be clear on the types of people you want to connect and grow with. Don't always just go for people who are above you either, because building laterally allows you to, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And usually people who are so far beyond where you are, they don't have the time to get you up to speed. But those who are on the same level as you, or you're, in similar levels, you guys can, join hands together and run farther together. So those would be my three.
I love it. I love it. Well, Alicia, if people want to connect with you offline, or I should say not offline, online, just off of here, where should they go?
So you can find me everywhere at my name, Alicia Reese, and that's ALECHIA REESE. And there was one question from YouTube that I wanted to make sure I answered. It was about sponsors and mentors. A mentor is someone who, they are the connect, they are the plug. They plug you into money, opportunities, and access. Mentors, they help you with, once you get plugged into those, or they'll either prepare you for those sponsors where, okay, this is how you position yourself, get yourself ready. Or once you're there, they talk you through how to stay there, because your talent can get you in the door. But if your character isn't up to par, you won't be able to stay in the door. So yeah, that's the difference.
I love it. I love it. Well, Alicia, thank you so much. We're actually going to head over to our networking rooms to put into practice what you shared, your brilliance that you shared with us today. So thanks so much for joining us at the FutureProof Virtual Summit.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Wasn't that amazing? Oh man, we have had such amazing panels today. So excited for all of the information that was shared. Now we're actually going to transition into the networking rooms over on Zoom. So I want you to join me over at Zoom using this link. thefutureproofsummit.com/Zoom. You can head over there, and again, it's thefutureproofsummit.com/Zoom. You can head over there to connect with all of the people who are, some who are already over there right now, who are connecting in our Zoom rooms and using some of the things that you learned here today at the FutureProof Virtual Summit. So we will see you over on Zoom, but thank you so much for joining us for the FutureProof Virtual Summit. And special thank you to the Coca-Cola Company for making this happen and making this possible. So thank you again. And I'll go ahead and have a sip of my Dasani. Thanks, Coca-Cola. See you guys over on Zoom. Bye now.